Thank you. Good evening. This is the meeting of the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee of March the 14th, 2022. I'm going to start by having the call of Standing Committee to order with the reading. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who were families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the late Simcoe, Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818, and the relationship it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation. Before I ask to have the committee adopt the agenda, I just wanted to mention two things. First, we will not be having a deputation that's listed as 5.1. That person's withdrawn their request. And also, with respect to 10.1, if you would ignore what's said there, and instead what the item is, will be Manager McGinnity speaking to the wastewater treatment plant digester operations and emergency response costs. So with that, could I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Councillor Doherty and Deputy Mayor Hall, thank you. Would there be any declarations of pecuniary interest this evening? Sorry. Oh, we didn't vote on that. Thank you. Okay, can we have a vote on accepting that agenda as amended? Thank you. Passed unanimously. Now on to declarations of pecuniary interest. Would there be any this evening? No, seeing none. If you do find yourself in that position, please announce it when it arises. Would there be any business arising from our previous meeting? Okay, seeing none. The first deputation on our agenda this evening is item 5.2. And can I ask that deputant to come forward, please? Clerk Almas, do we have that person? Oh, I think I see a face down there.
Good evening, committee. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for your patience. It took a second to connect through. I just want to see if Shakir Rehmatullah has connected as well. He's the president of FLATO Developments and was joining me for the deputation. I know he was in the Zoom link.
Yes, he's joining us now. Thank you.
Okay, just wait a second. I'm here.
Okay.
Thanks, Shakir. And before we get started, I'd just like to maybe ask the clerk, but is it okay if I share my screen in a few moments to take the committee through our brief presentation? Okay, I'll do that right now. Okay, apologies. Yep. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Kory Chisholm. I'm a partner with MHBC Planning, and I'm here this evening on behalf of FLATO Developments, Inc., as well as Wyview Group, to speak to you and present their vision for the master planned complete community that they envision for the land holdings which they've assembled in the southwest area of Collingwood. Before we get started, just a bit of background. Personally, I've been working with both FLATO and Wyview Group for over 5 years now. And in partnership with them, we've worked on a number of master planned complete communities in different municipalities across Southern Ontario, including communities both within Simcoe County as well as the County of Grey. The lands that FLATO and Wyview have assembled represent over 200 acres of contiguous lands in the southwest of the town of Collingwood. And they are contiguous to the Linksview subdivision, which, as you know, is draft plan approved. And we're working through red line and zoning amendments there to work on some revisions. We see that as the phase 1 lands, and then these larger land holdings will connect to those once that subdivision is built out. So I'll take you through our brief presentation, and then I will pass things over to Shakir afterwards, as I know he has some words he'd like to share with you as well. So if we can go to the next slide. And the slide following. So for context, the site is identified in red on your screen. You can see that, and that is in the extreme southwest corner of the town of Collingwood. So Grey County Road 19 on the west is the boundary between Collingwood and Town of Blue Mountains. It's also the county boundary between Simcoe and Grey. And then 6th Street along the south side represents the municipal boundary between Collingwood and the township of Clearview. I just would like to identify on here, the site identified in yellow is the draft plan approved Linksview subdivision, which we're currently working on as well. And we would like to start the process with you and your staff on starting to work collaboratively together to master plan for these important future development lands. With that, next slide. And I think we'll have to jump to again. Oh, perfect. So again, the site is identified in red. You will see it overlaid on the town's official plan schedule. The brown color represents the rural designation. So for these lands to be brought forward, we will need to bring them out of that land use designation in the fullness of time. You'll see the approved Linksview subdivision identified to the east. Those lands are designated, and as mentioned, they are draft plan approved and zoned, and we're working through some applications to provide a bit more of an efficient development on those lands. Can we go to the next slide? So the site again is identified on another official plan schedule, identifying natural heritage constraints. So we have started to both undertake desktop analysis, as well as Wyview and FLATO's ecology team have begun fieldwork, preliminary field investigations on the site as well. So here you will see some of the different constraints that are identified on the official plan schedule. You'll see in a later image through some of that field investigation, there have been some additional constraints identified that we know we'll have to respect and work around as we work through the process of completing the master plan. Next slide. So this is the site identified on the town's transportation network. So you will see it is well connected with frontage on 6th Street, as well as Grey County Road 19 on the west, which both represent arterials. And while we don't have direct frontage, the lands are close to Mountain Road, and we would expect in the fullness of time in the future that connections would be provided through adjacent lands over to Mountain Road as well. You will see the existing Blue Mountain Transit link on Mountain Road is just outside of the 10-minute walk radius. And as these lands develop into the future and more residents are brought into that portion of the community, we would expect some of the existing transportation networks would likely, there'd start to be demand in that area and potentially a new route added or existing route adjusted. Could we go to the next slide? So this is the slide I mentioned that shows the results of the preliminary field investigations that have been ongoing. So you can see that the entire area of the landholding, and this does not include the approved Linksview subdivision to the east, is around 324 acres. At this stage, we've identified constraints in red that we believe need to be protected, and the areas in yellow that we believe are developable. And at this stage, that represents approximately 220 acres of developable area. Next slide. So this is the conceptual master plan or master plan vision that our team has developed to this stage. You will see we're working with those existing two road connections from the Linksview subdivision to the east. And we've tried to plan this with some similar approach to the Linksview site. Some of those main arterials or collector roads have some bends in them to try to help with traffic calming, as we know that's a priority of the town. We've also tried to push density along the main roads. As you can see, the darker orange color represents medium density. That would be envisioned for various types of townhouse units, as well as the pink at the top is identified as attainable housing, and the red is high density, with the yellow lower density areas located a bit off of those main arterials. I would also like to point out on the far west end in brown, we identified a high density mixed use area. We envision this as almost like a smaller city center, mixed use kind of commercial area for the future residents in the southwest of the town of Collingwood. We also think there's plenty of opportunities to provide trails and active transportation opportunities through the identified natural heritage areas, connecting with what would be the future road pattern in the area. So this is very early stages. We've begun this work with our team, but we're certainly looking to have further collaboration, both from comments we hear from committee and council, as well as what we hope is through future working sessions with your very capable team at Town Hall. Next slide, please. And this is some representative images of various housing products, many of which are taken from developments that FLATO and Wyview have constructed in other municipalities, but certainly acknowledge the unique characteristic of the town of Collingwood, especially in the West End as we get closer to Blue Mountain, and that's the type of architectural feel at this stage we're envisioning for the area, but certainly would be working through the detailed urban design process with our team collaboratively with the town's team. Next slide. I think actually that's the last slide of the presentation. So with that, I'd like to thank committee for taking the time to allow us to present this evening. I know Shakir would like to share a few words with the committee as well, so I'll pass things over to him.
Thank you, Kory. My name is Shakir, Rehmatullah, and I'm the president of FLATO Developments. Madam Chair and the committee members, thank you so much for giving us the permission to come and present our vision with the town. We're looking forward to working with the town on this plan. Once again, this is just a preliminary concept plan. This is our vision. We're not married to this plan. We understand it's going to go back and forth, and based on the input from the town staff, from the council, and general public, this plan will be refined as needed. We just wanted to come in front of you to inform you. We wanted to be transparent in front of you of the land assembly that we have done. We own the 100 acres parcel, which is draft plan approved, and then we have assembled this 324 acres. Just, you know, we are in the planning phases. I know planning takes time, and engineering takes time, and we understand that the town is going through the infrastructure challenges, and we are completely agreeing with the approach the town has taken. And our entire 100-acre parcel is also, which is draft plan approved, which has been affected by the infrastructure, the new policy, the IC, the interim control bylaw, and we agree with the town. And we completely understand. In fact, I thank the town for recognizing the issue very quickly and the way the town has been handling head on. The first thing was you guys recognized that there was a problem, and second thing is you guys are working on
Just wanted
fixing
to
it.
say, excuse me, I just wanted to say you're over your 10 minutes, so if you could just
Okay,
wrap
so
up,
I'll just wrap
please.
it up. 30 seconds. Thank you. So we are we would like to just continue working with the town, and that said, we just wanted to come and present in front of you. And the only request we have tonight is just to receive our presentation and just allow us to continue working with the staff so that we can work on the planning process. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Would any members of the committee have any questions for either of these gentlemen? Mayor Saunderson, go ahead.
Yes, and thank you to both of you for coming tonight. I understand you own Linksview
Mayor.
Development, and was just wondering if you have a general timeline of which you'd like to proceed first with Linksview and then this development.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, Madam Chair. We would like to proceed as fast as we can. We were draft and approved. We have modified the plan as needed based on the comments we have received to date from staff. And the comments we have been receiving are good comments, and we completely respect the comments. And it's been a pleasure working with your team. So once again, if we can be granted allocation, we would love to proceed as fast as we can. And then at the same time, we would also like to work with staff on different forms of housing. We would like to provide a complete community. We believe in building master plan communities. We are actively working in over 10 municipalities in Ontario, large scale developments, either this size or bigger. So we understand it takes time, it takes vision, and we would love to continue working with your staff, sir.
Thank you, and if you're aware of our agenda tonight, you'll know that the water allocation framework is on there, and it's a merit-based framework, so there are ways that you can put your development forward in terms of affordable housing, sustainability, a number of items that you might wish to address when you speak with our staff.
Yes, sir, we would be looking into that, and yes, we would come back with the feedback based on the staff report. Definitely we'll be able to offer some of the good things that the staff would like us to provide in our application, for sure. We have the experience of providing different forms of housing, including seniors housing and including purposeful rental housing and affordable housing. So that we are doing in other communities in Ontario at the moment. So yes, we would be 100% ready for that.
Thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have one. Oh, sorry, Councillor Doherty, go ahead.
Thank you. And actually, it's not a question, but I just wanted to thank you for coming forward at this early juncture, and in particular to congratulate you for, I think, recognizing our community values quite well in your words today, and some of the elements that we have seen. And also your willingness to work collaboratively with our staff and with our new planning protocols as we go forward. So looking forward to seeing more.
Thank you, Councillor. And if I may add, one thing I've learned in this development and community building businesses, the more we collaborate, the sooner we start working with the municipalities, and the more we engage with the general public, the more public information sessions we have before the statutory public meetings. I think that leads to a good plan, and that keeps the town and the general public happy. So that's what we're looking over here as well, that we would keep on consulting with council, with staff, and with the general public. We will not just wait for the statutory public meeting to go to public. We would like to host public information sessions, not as sessions, so that people are informed and we keep on getting their feedback, so that when they come to the statutory public meeting, they're not shocked and they're like, we have never seen this. So with your permission, we would like to continue doing public information sessions in Collingwood as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any follow-up?
No, thank you very much.
Yes, my question is, as you know, we're undergoing a major official plan review in our community, and major developments like this they've been working with our planning consultant, who is going to be producing a draft official plan, we hope sooner than later. Have you been in contact and working with that process yet?
I don't believe so, but once we get the information, we would love to continue working, and we would start working with the outside consultant that the town has retained. Maybe Kory would know about that, but once we get the information, we're more than happy to start working. Once again, the only initiative today was to come forward to the township to inform and to be open and to be honest and to be transparent of what we own, what we have purchased, and what our vision is. I'm not saying our vision is going to be exactly what the people in the town would like, because sometimes we get comments from general public, and those are great comments, and we have to change the plan. So we thank you once again for listening to us, and we would love to continue working with your team, and we would love to work with the consultant that the town is hiring.
Thank you very much for your presentation tonight.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Take care.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is our regular update on the water capacity and land use planning study, and I'll turn the proceedings over to CEO Skinner. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. I know that we have some exciting things on the agenda today for our water, so I'll give you the overall update as we do each week. Next slide, please. So there has been a resolution for the last year or so that at each meeting, council and the public are updated until our ICBL is lifted, and with any luck that will be soon, with some dates that I'll show you shortly. And we cover the items that are listed on the slide, things like negotiations and exemptions, and we do have those generally in the updates as they go forward. Next slide, please. So the situation currently is that we do have a water supply that is safe and available. However, with the growth and other considerations, we realized and presented to council early in the first portion of last year that we weren't sure we would have enough to continue at the same pace until the expansion of the water treatment plant. And as soon as council was aware of this difficult situation, council took a very proactive and very transparent approach to both seek further capacity as soon as possible, even beyond the water treatment plant expansion, and to manage the remainder. So you know, we used an interim control bylaw, and we temporarily and transparently paused growth to ensure that we could grow as a complete community. And we put a new lens on a number of exemptions to this policy, and council has decided to move forward essentially all the ready-to-go development applications. And meanwhile, as well, most residential renovations and additions have been able to continue. So if there's anyone out there looking to, for example, put an accessory apartment or change the use of an commercial site, please talk to our planning or building departments, as we do have a number of options for you. So with the chlorine maximized and new ultraviolet expected to be put in the interim late this year in the existing plant, we are closing in on the capacity to meet our expected growth, expansion growth, if the plant is done at the end of 2025 or early 2026. And you'll see in one of the reports this evening, the one on the servicing policy, that we've proposed to committee the water that is available per year in the coming years, and that will be covered in that agenda item. Next slide. So first half is the water of this presentation is the water capacity update. Next slide. So we are continuing with negotiations at the staff level for the agreement with New Tecumseh. They are proposing to purchase a good amount of the much larger capacity of the new plant. And with respect to the plant application, we've submitted a drinking water works permit amendment application to MECP, the ministry. We've ordered our interim ultraviolet equipment, and fabrication is underway. The tender for the construction of the interim ultraviolet has been issued to the pre-qualified general contractors, And we have the meeting, as you're aware, in later February with our group of pre-qualified constructability review and general contractor group. And the site investigation works are wrapping up. And we do have drafts now for the third-party review of the chlorine addition that maximums that council had asked for, just to make sure that we have all the right numbers in place. Next slide. So the schedule has not changed. This is a graphical representation. So the next things coming up are the completion of the preliminary design this spring and the finalizing the agreement with New Tecumseh, but we are on track. Next slide, please. The remaining water supply is shown here. As of the decisions that council has currently made, the remaining allocation today is 492 single development units of water. And after the interim UV, in the bottom middle of this page, it's 1,282 single development units. That does not include the factor of safety, which we have set aside as a safety factor, and we will speak to that as well a little later this evening. Next slide. The interim control bylaw exemptions, I mentioned them earlier in this presentations, and those are exemptions to the interim control bylaw itself during the period of the interim control bylaw. And afterwards, water will be managed according to the recommendations, and the policy is coming forward this evening for committee's endorsement or review. If you have an interim control bylaw exemption, please continue through the process to get your building permit. And if you haven't been granted an exemption to date, we are processing planning applications at the staff side, going through reviews, making sure people know what's required. However, we're not intending to bring forward planning decisions to move projects forward to council until we have a completion of the interim control bylaw. So with any luck, that will happen very shortly, and council can again commence making planning decisions of this type. Next slide, please. Second half of this is the planning policy study update. Next slide. You can see from this graphical representation that we're very far along, and we're basically at the committee stage, and pending the decision tonight, in 2 weeks, we would be at the council approval stage for a policy for the allocation of water and wastewater servicing. Next slide. So in short, with what's left, tonight we have two reports, and March 29th is the last day for the zoning bylaw amendment appeals. We very much hope that we've taken into account the input of the development community and of our community members in general, and we do believe that we've struck a balance, and we hope that we have. Unfortunately, if the zoning bylaw is appealed, the interim control bylaw will be automatically extended beyond April 2022 until those appeals are resolved. Next slide. And that's the update for this evening, but I know you'll hear more on this topic shortly. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that update. Would any of the committee members want to pose any questions at this time? Okay, seeing none. We'll move on to the staff reports. We have 7 this evening. And Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. Given the number of questions that staff were fielding this afternoon, I'm wondering if it would be possible for staff, and I think most of them are all planning director, Valentine, could give a high overview summary of the questions that were asked, and then if the members of council have a follow-up, rather than having everybody ask their questions again one at a time. I think given what we have on our plate tonight, it might be a good way to handle it.
And I see you there, Director Valentine. Sorry. Does that make sense to you? Yes, thank you. Okay. So the first staff report is P 2022-08, Proposed Servicing Capacity Allocation Policy Framework for the Town of Collingwood. And I believe, Director Valentine, you're going to make the introduction here and then turn it over to a few of your able-bodied colleagues. So go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good evening to the committee members, staff, guests, and the public that are joining us today. This evening, we do have the second of the 3 products being recommended through the Land Use Planning Policy Study that would form part of a long-term servicing capacity allocation framework for the town of Collingwood and address existing and anticipated capacity constraints. As mentioned by the chair, we do have Mr. Nick McDonald from Meridian Planning here with us today as the lead consultant for the study team, as well as Director Slamma, who will both be providing a presentation in just a moment. Before we embark on the presentation and they remind us of the overall project background and take us through the recommended product, we'd like to acknowledge that this proposed servicing capacity allocation policy has been the result of many months of effort by a large number of individuals, including Manager McGinnity, Community Planner Wukash, former Interim Director Ron Glenn, CBO Miller, Solicitors Davis and Amelia, and many other staff, as well as dozens of participants from the development community and the public, whose thoughtful comments resulted in significant changes and improvements to the policy through 2 rounds of engagement, one in November of last year and more recently in February of this year. So to that end, we do have a number of revisions to the proposed policy since you last saw it in December. And to help everybody with those changes, we do have a track change copy of the policy available on the town's engagement website for ease of reference. With respect to the policy tonight, if the zoning bylaw amendment that was passed in February can be considered the backstop of the servicing allocation framework, the policy before you today would be characterized as the playbook. It represents a general pivot away from an informal first come, first serve approach to capacity to a documented and tracked merit-based system, which would prioritize servicing capacity allocation for projects that provide key community benefits and contribute to complete, healthy, and compact communities. The policy itself outlines how, when, and for how long, as well as through what mechanism capacity would be allocated, which types of development would be subject to the merit-based criteria, and general implementation processes. The policy also provides for tension in the system to ensure that capacity is not held without performance. The policy is a standalone document. It does sit outside of the town's official plan, and we've received a number of questions on that. It allows us for updates without the need for an official plan amendment, and there are certainly some benefits to this approach in that the policy can be more easily revisited, updated, and improved if it's not functioning as intended, or if there are enhancements that are identified by this council, staff, or the development community. The policy itself indicates that a significant change would require a transparent process, and we have a monitoring and tracking system on a 6-month basis at this time, with a commitment to do a comprehensive review of the policy in 18 months. As mentioned, we did receive a number of questions from councillors in advance of the meeting. I'll try to take just a moment before we move to the presentation to try to summarize briefly. Some of the answers are also covered in the presentation, but if there's anything that you don't feel satisfied with, we're happy to have some of those questions restated and or additional clarification provided. So we did get some questions about how changes of use are dealt with in the policy. And it is certainly the intent that changes of use from, for example, one commercial use to another commercial use that's permitted in the town zoning bylaw would not be subject to the policy. And that's important from an economic development perspective to allow changes of tenants or changes of business to happen as seamlessly as possible. We had some questions about how the policy deals with phasing, and plans of subdivision can certainly be phased. Moving forward, developing not comprehensively over time in smaller quantities. And the policy is drafted in such a way that we can deal with plans of subdivision that are either phased or not phased depending on their size, and there's different pathways for each of those specific circumstances. The main ability to create tension within the system is created through sunset clauses for capacity allocation. And there were some questions around why those sunset clauses are different for plans of subdivision as opposed to site plan applications. And that is primarily because site plan applications are much closer to being shovel ready than the more longer term plans of subdivision. There are also some legislative connections with respect to some of the lapsing dates, which we aligned with the Planning Act. And then finally, there was some suggestions about how we might increase tension in the system over time. And certainly council is able to consider adjustments to this policy. As mentioned in my introductory remarks, we do have a 6-month reporting and tracking system and a comprehensive review at the 18-month mark. So hopefully that answers some of the questions that were provided. Again, we're certainly happy to address those as the conversation unfolds. But to conclude with my statements, it's the opinion of the study team that the policy does strike a balance between flexibility and certainty. It creates a fair and transparent allocation system, and it prioritizes projects with key community benefits and contributions. So with those introductory remarks completed, Madam Chair, at your discretion, we would turn the floor over to Mr. McDonald, followed by Director Slamma, to go through the presentation, which will outline for committee and the public the changes to the policy since you last saw it in December. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Please proceed.
Great. So this is Nick McDonald. I'm the president of Meridian Planning Consultants. I've been before you before, so good evening. Actually, it's good afternoon, soon to be evening. Summer did a very good job providing an overview of why we're here today to talk to you, so I'll try not to repeat some of what she said. So of course, I'm here tonight to present our final recommendations on the service and capacity allocation policy. And we've actually created an acronym like all planners do. We love creating acronyms, and we've created one for this process as well, and it's called SCAP. As the town is well aware, interim control bylaw was passed by council on April 26th of 2021. And of course, as you know, it'll expire in April of this year. And the intent of the ICBL, if we can go to the first slide, please, that'd be great, thanks. And the intent of the ICBL was to pause development, of course, until the town develops a framework to allocate water and wastewater capacity, which is what we've been working on for the last year or so. And of course, once finalized, the framework will then be relied upon to make decisions as the town continues to grow. Next slide. As Director Valentine indicated, there is a three-pronged approach being relied upon to deal with the issue of allocating a scarce resource. In this regard, official plan policies have been recommended for inclusion in the new official plan, and these policies are generally intended to ensure that future growth management and infrastructure decisions are as integrated as possible. An amendment to the zoning bylaw was also recommended, and the intent of that process was to ensure adequate municipal services are available when applications that do not require a Planning Act approval are submitted. And in this regard, bylaw 2022-007 was passed by council on February 28th. And as you've heard, the last day of appeal is March 29th. The main focus of the study, however, has been this policy. And in this regard, the version being presented is the third iteration of that policy, with the two previous iterations being the subject of professionally facilitated consultation sessions with the development community and the public. Next slide, please. So the intent of the recommended allocation policy has always been to ensure that capacity is allocated in a sustainable, transparent, and orderly manner, to prioritize allocations of those projects that provide the greatest benefit to the town, and lastly, to establish a process that clearly identifies when and for how long allocation is committed. These intents have continued to underpin our recommendations throughout the process. And of course, once the policy has been approved by council, it will affect all future decisions on development, unless that development, of course, is explicitly exempt. Next slide. In terms of the broad contents of the policy document itself, they have not changed, and it continues to identify where the policy applies, which are the urban parts of the town. It identifies how capacity is measured, and that is through a single dwelling unit equivalency factor that is determined, measured, and tracked by the Collingwood Environmental Services Division. It identifies what development is and is not subject to this policy. And of course, it applies to most applications for development, but it doesn't apply, for example, to up to 2 additional residential units on a lot, a change in use requiring an increase in services, and minor renovations and rebuilds. And in this regard, in response to one of the questions received today, if we need to, we will look at the change of use wording to make sure that it is as responsive as possible to as many circumstances as possible, because these minor developments certainly are positive developments for the town and represent positive economic development. Policy also applies when and for how long capacity is allocated and when commitments expire. And that, of course, depends on the application type and where the proposal is in the process. It deals with how to deal with existing approvals. And while there aren't that many of them, they do need to be considered, and a number of approaches have been identified. Also includes merit-based criteria that will be relied upon to make decisions for large-scale development. And this is truly the key component of what I'm considering to be a forward-looking policy. Also deals with how capacity allocation will be monitored and tracked. Means a lot of work for the town moving forward, but it's absolutely necessary to make informed decisions going forward as well. And it also identifies other implementation mechanisms. Next slide. As noted previously, this is the 3rd iteration of the policy document, and a number of changes have been made in response to community, staff, and legal input to add clarity where needed, to provide additional flexibility that recognizes the variety of contexts that apply in decision-making process, and to remove any unnecessary provisions while retaining the core components of the overall merit-based approach to decision-making. And as Director Valentine indicated, all of the changes are shown in a track changes version of the policy on the town's engagement website. So there are 25 changes I will quickly take you through. Some are more significant than others, but none are truly that significant. They all build upon the core policies that were initially established, and they continue to improve how the policy will work and be implemented. So the first change we made is we added some additional context into the introduction to provide a further rationale for the need for the policy. And this was designed, quite frankly, to provide the reader with a more fulsome explanation for the rationale for the policy itself, which of course is founded upon the management or the need to manage a very scarce resource. Secondly, the definition of additional residential unit has been expanded to now include additional residential units established in conjunction with institutional uses. This obviously provides additional opportunities for affordable housing and would be in addition to such units being permitted on residential and commercial properties. Next slide. The definition of affordable housing has also been broadened to be inclusive of the provincial policy statement or the Canadian Mortgage and Housing County of Simcoe or any other council endorsed Town of Collingwood standard. This means, in my view, that any reasonable metric based on context can be relied upon by town staff in the decision-making process. And we wanted to make sure that we were as open to any reasonable definition of affordable in the implementation of this policy going forward. Where the policy does not apply has been broadened to include both the rural and rural residential designations. Previously, it just applied to the rural designation. The rural residential designation applies to a number of existing subdivisions along the town's western border. So those areas would not be subject to the policy. Projects that have previously received an exemption from the ICBL and which have not proceeded have been given a 1-year exemption to the policy, and that's in section A6. These are projects that were exempted by council already, but which have, for one reason or another, not proceeded to a building permit. Of course, this is designed to minimize any hardship Obviously, those folks who got the exemptions initially applied for them in good faith, and we felt it was important to allow for those exemptions to be carried forward, but only for a one-year period. Additional clarity is being provided on the potential for allocation for draft approved projects to be available in stages or phases. Director Valentine touched upon this in her introductory remarks. The previous version of the policy document did allow for allocation in phases, but now the policy indicates more clearly that development may be phased to facilitate the orderly build out of proposals going forward. Next slide. So the policy is also being changed to provide additional direction on the extenuating circumstances that would be considered when requests to extend draft plan approval are submitted. And in this regard, examples are provided. They include change of ownership, significant changes to the proposal itself, or unforeseen economic conditions. Capacity would still remain allocated for three years or 36 months plus a 12 months extension. The requirement to deposit security equal to the water and wastewater component of the development charge has been removed from the policy document, but it will be revisited. Previously, the policy indicated the securities equal to water and wastewater charge would be required. And of course, while this makes sense in principle, the town's legal team would like to do some more research on this and provide some advice at a future date. The policy now also provides additional direction on whether allocations should be withdrawn in cases where developments who have that have obtained site plan approval have not proceeded to construction within 24 to 48 months. Essentially, capacity is issued for 2 years, and a 2-year extension may be considered depending on the circumstance, which would obviously be extenuating in nature. And as Director Valentine indicated, the 24-month initial time period corresponds to the town's practice in terms of how long these agreements go for. Consent to sever applications, which are limited in number, we've determined, will not be subject to the merit-based system unless site plan approval is required prior to their development. This recognizes that this form of development is very rare, and it wasn't necessary to apply this policy to this type of development going forward. Policy now provides additional clarity on capacity allocation for developments that do not require a Planning Act approval, and that's in section A9. And in this regard, the policy continues to indicate that a yearly capacity amount for this type of development will be established. And of course, it is assumed that once capacity constraints are solved, there will probably be no need for this provision going forward. Next slide. Additional clarity is being provided on how mixed-use proposals will be evaluated in the merit-based system. Essentially, which use has the most floor area will be the path it has to follow in that system. We've added a criterion in the merit-based system that makes points available if density targets for greenfield development are met. And this, of course, is intended to support higher densities where appropriate. We've provided some additional clarity on what is considered transit supportive development. And in particular, that means within 400 to 800 meters of existing or planned transit routes. We've added a reference, but not a requirement, to conveying natural heritage features into public ownership. Previously, points were awarded if conveyances were proposed over and above what was required to obtain points. Now conveyance is one of a number of measures that could be considered, with another being, for example, the maintenance or enhancement of the tree canopy, which is referenced in the next bullet below. We've also increased points available for the inclusion of key infrastructure. And in this regard, we've increased the points available from 5 to 10. And we've also provided more flexible criteria in C1, C2 to allow for consideration of upgrades or reconstruction of infrastructure, not just the provision of new facilities. And that, of course, recognizes that benefits also occur from upgrading in addition to developing new. Next slide. We've also provided some examples of what active transportation infrastructure is, and they are, of course, trails, bicycle lanes, separated corridors, sidewalks, and bike storage areas. We've deleted the criterion related to fiscal impact, as this was too difficult to ascertain without a study being completed for every proposal. And this, of course, is an example, in my view, of deleting something that was way too subjective. And that's why we did that. We've increased the available points for good urban design and explicitly referencing that the requirements of any master plan or guideline can be exceeded. We've also recognized the importance of good urban design as a consequence, and we've increased the points available from 3 to 6. We've also increased the available points for shovel readiness to ensure tension in the system, as Director Valentine indicated. And we've increased it from 10 to 15 points. And to some extent, doing this reflects the past decisions that have been made to exempt developments from the ICBL, with shovel ready being a key part of the decision-making process. We've also clarified some of the implementation processes for the merit-based system. And in this regard, we've indicated clearly that the points will be allocated in a process that is concurrent with the review of the actual planning applications. And we've also indicated in the policy document that applicants are encouraged to design their proposals, of course, to obtain maximum scores and to do their own scoring as part of their submission. We've also included a new idea in here, and that is to require that a comprehensive review of the policy occur within 18 months. We felt this was an important addition to ensure that the policy was reviewed in a timely manner. This, of course, does not prevent Council from reviewing the policy any earlier or making tweaks to it as required. And then lastly, we've clarified in the policy that nothing prevents the town from applying a holding provision where necessary. This is the case anyways. The Planning Act allows you to do that, but it was worth mentioning to ensure that the policy document was as comprehensive as possible. Next slide, please. So it is the opinion of the study team, and Director Valentine went through some of this in her introductory remarks, that the recommended allocation policy strikes an appropriate balance between flexibility and certainty. We've spent a lot of time trying to find that right balance. We think we've got it. There may be other views out there. It may be something that's looked at in 18 months, but we think we've struck an appropriate balance in that regard. We think it also creates a transparent, fair, and predictable system of servicing capacity allocation. We also think it allows stakeholders to understand how, when, and for how long, and through what mechanism capacity would be allocated, which types of development will be subject to the merit-based criteria and which will not, and of course, what general implementation processes apply. We think it allows for flexibility, creativity, and innovation in interpretation that is appropriate for a policy document. And quite frankly, we think there is a lot of opportunity here for interpretation, which we think is a good thing. One of the things we heard early on in the process is that it looked like the policies, or at least the merit-based component of the policies, were too rigid. And we spent a lot of time thinking about that to ensure that it was flexible enough, yet understandable when dealing with all types of applications and all types of geographies. The policy will be reviewed and updated for continuous improvement, as it should. It supports planning for growth in a manner that aligns land use and infrastructure decisions to ensure that municipal services are available to support construction. And lastly, it prioritizes servicing capacity allocation for projects that provide key community benefits and contribute to complete, healthy, and compact communities. And that's really where the merit-based criteria are intended to, what the merit-based criteria are intended to support. Next slide. So in terms of next steps, the allocation policy will be considered by Council for adoption on March 28th of 2022. As indicated earlier, the appeal period for the zoning bylaw ends on March 29th of 2022. So that's the day before that occurs. And of course, if the zoning bylaw amendment is appealed, the interim control bylaw is automatically extended. The development pause will continue, and Council may, but of course is not obligated to consider additional exemptions. In terms of the draft official plan itself, it is planned to be released in April, and that is tentative, subject to other project priorities, is my understanding. And of course, this framework will be relied upon to make decisions as the town continues to grow. So before we take questions, it's my understanding that Director Slamma has a slide that goes after this, and I will hand it over to her. And then, of course, we will all collectively be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Nick. This is Director Slamma. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great, thank you. So I just wanted to, I was going to speak to the determination of the annual threshold that has been included in the report for the policy. So in considering an annual threshold, this is a means that allows the town to manage the capacity allocation until the water treatment plant expansion and also beyond. We have mentioned a few times that we do expect a threshold to continue beyond the water treatment plant, as we're aware that in the future, the wastewater treatment plant will be looking at an expansion for that piece of infrastructure as well. And we need to continue to manage the available capacity for both water and wastewater. And in setting an annual capacity threshold, it does provide some assurance to the development community. And we have recognized the anticipated growth. And this is just, one piece or one mechanism where we can manage what we have available. So when we consider the annual available capacity for allocation, this is a number that would be divided between developments that will go through the merit-based approach, also projects that do not require planning approvals. And examples of that would be existing registered lots, new lots created by consent, land subject to an existing site plan agreement, and changes of uses that would require additional allocation but no Planning Act approval. And also, the annual allocation will include government-led projects deemed to be in the interest of the public. So for the town, this may be a project that's health and safety related, educational, recreational, or affordable housing as well. In determining the annual capacity allocation, environmental services completed an analysis. In that analysis, we looked at historical water usage. So we didn't just look at 1 year, the highest year of the MDD. We did look at a 5-year average of the MDD. We looked at the capacity required for currently unserviced developments, proposals that have already been received. We looked at the remaining water capacity with and without UV disinfection at the water treatment plant. And we needed to look at those two scenarios because currently we don't have the UV disinfection. So our available capacity is different and lower. It will increase after we have the UV disinfection in place. We also looked at reducing supply commitments to our customer municipalities. So this would be New Tecumseh and Town of Blue Mountain. These would be reductions in supply prior to our commissioned expansion. And I will mention that any reduction in supply commitments will require discussion and agreement with those customer municipalities, but we have included that. And we also included the 5% factor of safety. Oops. Next slide, please. So with consideration of all of these factors, we have recommended that between 2022 and 2024, looking at considering with the UV disinfection in place, which should be, we hope to be commissioned before the end of 2022, leaving the 5% factor of safety, the available SDUs will be 1,282. So we're recommending 430 SDUs per year between 22 and the end of 24. And as we look ahead to 2025 and 2026, with the water treatment plant expansion on schedule, so provided that that project has started, we have a certain level of comfort related to what the schedule for that expansion will be. This is when we'll look at releasing the 5% factor of safety. And I want to mention and remind everyone that we will be conducting semi-annual analysis and reporting on the available capacity to council and the public. And in looking at this, doing the semi-annual reporting and review, this will, for us, highlight the pace of developments, right? So we'll be able to see what has been allocated through submissions to the planning department. We'll have an idea of what any developments that haven't proceeded as planned, or if there was any adjustments related to developments such as withdrawing any allocation in future years. So the semi-annual review will provide us gives us some flexibility and allows us to make some adjustments. Again, another item I wanted to mention was if in 1 year the allocation is not, the threshold is not allocated, then we can look at providing that what was not allocated in future years. So so it provides us that flexibility. So for 2022, we did want to highlight for the remainder of 2022, we are looking at recommending the 430 SDUs in total, with 100 SDUs for proposals that do not require planning approvals. And a note that there may be some allocation reserved for town-led projects such as the grain terminals as those proceed this year. And that's all I had, Chair Hamlin.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That was very informative. Clerk Almas, would there be any members of the public who have any questions or comments?
Certainly, thank you, Chair Hamlin. We do have a number of attendees attending this evening. If you wish to address the committee regarding the staff report, please press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will unmute you. We have Mr. Bob Tyson wishing to address the committee.
Go ahead, Mr. Tyson.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I noticed the report, the Meridian report, did refer to tree canopy, and our group here has proposed something about initial tree canopy, and I'm just wondering if this is appropriate to discuss that, because I haven't had any feedback on that proposal.
Yes, I think it would be appropriate. Go ahead.
So again, what we're asking for is the town to consider initial tree canopy as opposed to tree canopy at maturity for any site plan being approved from this day going forward. And does that make sense to tie that into what's being discussed today?
I'm going to just ask if Director Valentine would mind answering that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity. Mr. Tyson and I have had a number of exchanges on this issue, and he's made some delegations as well to committee and council. So the crux of the matter is the guideline that Mr. Tyson is looking to alter as part of the urban design manual of the town of Collingwood, which is undergoing a comprehensive review at this time, concurrent with the official plan update. So to make any significant changes, staff would continue to recommend that be part of the comprehensive process and involve consultation, including with the development community. That being said, council can provide different direction on that matter. Mr. Tyson did take a look at the process that we have going on today for the service and capacity allocation policy, and he did say, well, is there any way we can look at the tree canopy issue through this lens? And we did, in response to his comments, make a couple of changes, as Mr. McDonald went over in his presentation, that through the merit-based criteria relating to the protection of natural resources, the enhancement of the tree canopy could be included as part of the evaluation of that criteria. As well, we did indicate very specifically that any urban design or master plan requirements could be exceeded, and there would be an analysis of whether exceeding a current requirement of the town would merit additional points within the appropriate category. So we were able to include the thread of the tree canopy, but staff continue to recommend that the change to the urban design manual itself be undertaken as part of the comprehensive review process.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Director Valentine. I did notice those incentives and happy that for preserving the tree canopy through our servicing allocation and the other matters you've mentioned. Does that answer your question then, Mr. Tyson, at this point?
No, not really. I mean, I appreciate that. Sorry, can you hear me still?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I appreciate that you know, there's comments about it, but what I'm asking is very specific, which is for any site plan going forward, instead of using the tree canopy at maturity recommendation or guideline in the urban design manual, can we change that and make sure that any site plan being approved going forward meets the requirements for either maintaining or replacing initial tree canopy? That's, and sorry, but I just can't get an answer to that.
Okay, do you have any, this is your opportunity to make a deputation on this point, of course. We're not here to answer your questions. But is there anything else you'd like to say on that? I think you've made it very clear.
No, I would just like to know how we can resolve this issue so that I can get back to the two condo boards that I represent and tell them what's going to happen or what cannot happen. Or I was hoping the town would involve the solicitors and try and figure it out and maybe tie it into this ICBL. I don't know.
I see Director Valentine now has some further comments on this. Go ahead, Director Valentine.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and appreciating what Mr. Tyson is trying to achieve. It's staff's opinion that specific requirements would not be appropriate through this capacity allocation policy. We have made some amendments to address tree canopy in a general sense and incent developers to go above and beyond the existing policies, guidelines, and manuals in order to maximize the points available to their development. It remains the opinion of staff that addressing a significant change to the urban design manual should be done in an open, transparent manner through the comprehensive review of that document, including public consultation and the development community. But of course, council does provide staff directions. So if council and committee would like to consider a specific amendment related to Mr. Tyson's request, then I would defer to Clerk Almus on the appropriate avenue to do so. But we would have to discuss prioritizing and reallocating resources to undertake that consultation process around an individual amendment to the urban design manual rather than dealing with his request through the comprehensive review.
Okay, thank you for explaining that further. So I think, Mr. Tyson, we understand your request. It's not appropriate to bring it in through this allocation framework, I would suggest. But I do wonder if this is something we could discuss offline, subject to other comments from our council that we'll hear from when we're finished. Do you have any further comments this evening?
No. I mean, I appreciate you giving me the chance to address it, and again, I wouldn't address it if I thought the current conditions or urban design manual addressed tree canopy correctly, and I just think it's a horrible shortfall for Collingwood. But I'm willing to, however you guys want to deal with it, I'm available, and the two condo boards here are available as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate your coming forward tonight with your suggestions. And so we're going to see if there's any members who have questions for you. And I see Mayor Saunderson has one. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe I could just ask a question to clarify if I've got Mr. Tyson's comments correct. Through you to Director Valentine. Director Valentine, I think you've indicated that the Urban Design Manual is currently under consideration as part of our official plan process. Is that right?
Through you,
Director
Madam Chair, that's
Valentine?
correct.
Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
My
Yes,
apologies. Through you, Madam Chair, that is correct.
And I think what you've indicated is that that process will be, there will be public engagement in that process, and there'd be an opportunity for Mr. Tyson and the condominium boards to make their comments about the current canopy measurements, as in the current Urban Design Manual, when we reconsider that Urban Design Manual as part of our official plan review. So I think my understanding is that under the proposed allocation policy, it refers to or defers to the Urban Design Manual as the canopy measurement, and if that design manual calculations change, then that would impact the policy as well.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. And again, we have also included wording that is very clear that developers can certainly exceed the requirements of the Urban Design Manual as well in order to maximize the number of points available. So there's no need, if they would wish to exceed the canopy requirements, that they wouldn't necessarily have to wait until the Urban Design Manual is updated, but to make it a formal requirement, that would necessitate the update of the overall manual. And staff are suggesting that that occur in a comprehensive manner rather than on a topic by topic basis as they arise.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Deputy Mayor Hall, please go ahead.
Thank you. The question would be through you to our Director of Planning, and perhaps the question could be answered after the fact. But Mr. Tyson, and I'm very empathetic and both sympathetic to the matter that he's bringing forward tonight, regardless of whether it fits within the issue that we're speaking to or the fact that it ties in with the urban design guidelines. I think that the crux of the issue is that you've got moving parts and a community that has embraced the surroundings to which they've become accustomed to, and development that may or may not take place at some point. And, I think that I would appreciate maybe an update from the director at some point as to how that development, specifically Blue Fairways 5 and 6, and their timeline fits in with the timelines that we are working with as it relates to the OP and to the urban design review. Because I don't want to be here in a position giving false hope that we're willing to work with the community, knowing full well that a developer is going to be able to get approvals prior to the completion of the exhaustive work that's taking place, rather than having an opportunity for those things to take place, and then appropriately make comment and have an opportunity maybe to specifically address these concerns within those appropriate documents, so that they could be incorporated in the two developments that Mr. Tyson is speaking to. I think he's being very kind in the fact that he hasn't identified tonight what it is he's addressing. We all know what he's addressing, and I just would like to have that timeline presented to us, maybe at our next council meeting on the 28th, when we bring forward these minutes, if that would be appropriate.
Yes, thank you for that helpful suggestion, Deputy Mayor. Yes, Director Valentine, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we can certainly bring forward a timeline, but I do think I have a succinct answer to Deputy Mayor's question at this time. So there's a principle in planning that when an application is submitted and deemed complete, it's disposed of under the policies that are in place at the time that application was deemed complete and submitted. So in this case, And we've talked with Mr. Tyson about his concerns specifically, but he does indicate that his concerns are more general to the overall tree canopy in the town of Collingwood. But with respect to Blue Fairways 5 and 6, those will be disposed of under the existing official plan and the existing urban design manual as we move forward, due to the legal principles around which policies apply when a development application is deemed complete. So there is an element, I would say, of perhaps not necessarily being able to meet the requirements that he's suggesting for existing developments that are in flight that have a complete application and are awaiting the expiry of the ICBL to move forward. And we do expect Blue Fairies to be one of the first applications to move forward once the ICBL is lifted. So it is a quite short-term endeavor.
Any follow-up, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. I appreciate, through you to the Director of Planning, I appreciate that two things. One, that you've identified that it's a complete, or it's been deemed complete, and two, that this is one of many files in which were on your desk at your arrival with the municipality. I'm going to have to go back and just take a look at the timeline. The part that I think concerns me and maybe a few others, and it is not specific to the item that we're speaking to tonight, is that something that has been deemed complete, in my opinion, does not necessarily deem it appropriate. And when I had the opportunity to take a look at what was being proposed, to walk the site, and for full disclosure, I had an opportunity to walk the site with Mr. Tyson. I think that the concerns that have been raised as it relates to location of buildings, the impact that they will have on the existing community, don't necessarily convey, and to piggyback on your earlier comments, Councillor Doherty, to our deputant tonight, they don't necessarily reflect the values in terms of what we're looking at from a development standpoint. The pieces of the development that are proposed within Blue Fairway are not inconsistent with what they have built today. So I'm not suggesting that it is something that is inconsistent. What I am suggesting is that they've demonstrated an ability to create a site plan through phases 3 and 4 that are more compatible. And my question, and I think it's fair that Mr. Tyson has asked this question, why can't the developer do the same thing for 5 and 6 and revisit the locations of physical buildings? And I appreciate the latitude because this is not on the agenda tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Would anyone like to bring a motion at this time?
Oh, sorry. Can I just...
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Deputy Hull. Deputy Mayor.
A question that is specific to...
Yes, you may. A question on the allocation framework. Go ahead.
It was, I believe, and I apologize, I've minimized the file. I think
wait, before we do that, we have a deputant. Is he still there or is he finished? He's gone. Yes. Okay. All right. Go ahead. Wait. So it's we have to, before we get to questions from our committee members, we just have to see if there's any other members of the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. We do have Mr. Bob Tyson had a closing remark, so we'll let him speak, and then we do have another gentleman wishing to address the committee as well.
Thank you.
Tyson?
Mr.
Sorry,
Tyson?
I don't want to. Yeah. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I don't want to take up your whole meeting because, but the issues with the Blue Fairways Phase 5 and 6 are correct, and they were described correctly by Deputy Mayor Hall. But in general, I think Collingwood would benefit from the possibility of stopping the tree canopy at maturity being used for another day and replacing it with initial tree canopy at time of occupancy. And I guess I still have not heard, I mean, I've heard that it's not possible because, but I guess I would like to hear that from, you know, the town solicitor, if that's at all possible.
For those questions and comments, very much appreciated. Clerk Almas, who else would like to speak to us tonight on this topic?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. We have John Welton.
Go ahead, Mr. Welton.
Thank you. I was listening to Director Slamma talk about the 2022 allocations, and I just wanted to understand. It was shown that there's 430 SDUs, and 100 of them were committed or something like that. And so I wanted to understand the context with the 100 units. Are those units that were exempted from the interim control bylaw? Because where I'm going is Summit View subdivision is about 400 units, and is it outside of the 430 units per year that are being considered? And also, are there other large developments that are already sort of built into the calculation and not included in the 430 SDUs per year, such as Balmoral Village or any of the higher density sites?
Okay, thank you. Who would like to answer that question? Okay, Director Slamma, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. Through you to Mr. Welton. So the inclusion of reserving 100 SDUs out of the 430 for 2022, that does not include the exemptions, because we have already accounted for the exemptions. So when we look at what our remaining capacity in SDUs is today, which is what we report at the beginning of each of our council meetings each week. So that number considers the exemptions that have been approved through the ICBL. So these 100 SDUs, that will account for developments that have already been approved and don't require any additional planning approvals. So in this case, we do know that there is 100 and some, and Director Valentine will be able to provide the exact number, 100 and some for Summit View in phase 2B, I believe. And so that is those are accounted for, like what is anticipated to be used for that development in 2022 has been accounted for in the number. And then we also have within that 100 reserved some for other proposals that don't require planning approval.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. Do you have any other comments, sir?
Yes, thank you. So the 100 SDUs allowance then seems to be a pretty generous allowance for the number of non-planning applications. Is that correct? Are there more than a dozen?
Go ahead, Director Valentine.
Oh, I see that Director Slamma also has her microphone off. So with your permission, Madam Chair, I'll throw it over to her next. But to clarify, Mr. Welton, the 100 units set aside in 2022 for those developments that could move forward without planning applications, a good portion of that 100 will be on a first come, first served basis, will be allocated to the Summit View proposal if they do come in for their building permits in 2022. So that number is, as Director Slamma said, anticipating that we have approximately 108 additional units to build out over the next couple of years as part of the Summit View development. That is the only large-scale registered plan that we're aware of. You are quite correct. That's sort of the one-off individual developments of existing vacant lots on a case-by-case basis, or to facilitate accessory residential units, for example, those would be more, a dozen to 30 SDUs per year. But we do have that one registered plan being Summit View, which is outstanding and is intended to build out over the 2022 and 2023 timeframe on a first come, first served basis.
Okay, thank you very much. I think your time's about up, Mr. Welton. Do you have any final remarks?
I was only going to clarify that there might be an additional phase of Summit View after that. So that would be considered for the next year. Okay, I'm getting a nod. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Is there anyone else in the gallery there, Clerk Almas? No, there isn't. All right, so at this point, I'm going to read in the resolution that report P 2022-05, proposed servicing capacity allocation policy framework for the town of Collingwood be received, and further that council enacts and passes a bylaw adopting the servicing capacity allocation policy attached as Appendix B, with the effective date being the day after the expiry of the interim control bylaw number 2021-024. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Mayor Saunderson and Councillor Jeffrey, thank you. And would council have any questions on this matter? Mayor Saunderson, and then Deputy Mayor Hall, and then Councillor Doherty.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and really more comments than questions at this point. This has been a long process, and as we heard from Planning Director Valentine and our consultant, Mr. McDonald, there's been a lot of public input as we've gone through this. I am in favor of this, and I am in favor of the reviews that we're going to have at 6-month intervals, and then a more fulsome review after 18 months. I think we've shown a great deal of transparency in adopting this policy, which has come into critical phase for this community. And we're going to talk about the expansion of our progress of our water treatment plant later in the meeting. But I think this is a critical piece of the puzzle moving forward, and it is important beyond the completion of the water treatment plant as our community continues to grow. So I think that having these 6-month reviews will give us an opportunity to be able to review it as it's working and it being implemented, and we get a better understanding of how it's going to impact the community moving forward. But I certainly support this.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Perhaps through you to our CAO or to Director of Planning or consultant. It is a, sorry, I'll pull it up again. It's a question I'd like to ask that is specific to bullet point number 24, and it's requiring that a comprehensive review of the SCAP occur within 18 months. And it is a question that I had not considered prior to seeing that particular bullet point. It's not a question that perhaps could be answered tonight, and therefore maybe it could be answered prior to the introduction of the bylaw at the council meeting. And that is that, and I say this with the utmost respect to all parties involved, whether it be the parties from our staff, from our consulting side, and from the development community. And that is that we have come through in an incredibly difficult time. An incredible amount of work has been done. And I think that we are very close to defining the rules of engagement and the playbook for moving ahead. I asked the question with the context that we have witnessed this both within the town of Collingwood from an historical perspective, and we certainly have witnessed this at the provincial and the federal level. And that is that we are not that far out from an election. And in the interest of ensuring that this good work carries forward from one to the next, and that's why I say perhaps this could be answered at the council meeting, what safeguards or provisions are put in place to ensure that this bylaw is not unduly influenced through the election campaign by a party that's wanting to maybe fast track that hasn't been identified at this time.
Could you explain that question again? I don't think I followed it.
I guess what
Thank you.
I'm saying is that we're very close to passing bylaws that establish basically the framework to get us from point A to point B. Point B, bringing the treatment plant on capacity late 2025, 2026. And as I said, there is we have seen it within the town of Collingwood, and we certainly see it at the provincial and federal levels, where an election takes place and a new form of government takes place, and on day one cancels or changes tact of direction as it relates to what has been already put in place. And so I'm just asking what provisions have already been maybe considered that would ensure that as we approach the upcoming election campaign, that things have been already taken into account to ensure that individuals cannot be unduly influenced with the thought that somehow they could be elected and take office and change the direction.
Okay. And any staff member want to take this one on, or at this meeting or another meeting perhaps? Theo Skinner?
Could I just, may I?
Yes, sorry.
I'm more than happy to wait for a response. That is a very loaded question.
Yeah.
And it was a question that came out of simply when I heard the comment. So I'm more than prepared to wait for comment.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a fair approach to this. Thank you. Did you have any other questions, Deputy Mayor?
No.
No. Okay, good. That's enough. Oh, Councillor Doherty, would you like to ask your question or give your comments?
Yes, thank you. And they are really just primarily questions, or sorry, comments. The first being that please let me echo the comments of the mayor in regard to the yeoman's task that has been undertaken here. It is when you look at this entire document that you realize just how much work has gone into it. And I think it has been a tremendous balance of what is good planning, answering the questions and the needs of our development community, answering the questions and the needs of our community, and I really do congratulate you for that. And then just a couple of very specific comments. First of all, and just touching back to the notion of enhancement of the tree canopy as an additional criteria over and above conveyance of natural heritage, if that is not possible or not done and it's a priority, that is another action that a developer can take to earn points, as it were. I actually thought that was a good step toward the objective that Mr. Tyson has conveyed to us, being a little bit more specific about what we have today and in making sure that we, at minimum, preserve what we have today, if not improve it. So I hope that it will continue to evolve, and I hope that the development community sees this as a great opportunity. And I certainly will look forward to the final publication of our updated urban design standards in that regard. Second comment is in regard to potentially having a third-party review of merit-based evaluations between the planning department and the developer as they're attempting to move their project forward. Has there been consideration given to, as opposed to a planning professional, I do know, I am aware of other communities where planning advisory boards or committees exist, and they are comprised of volunteers from the community. Now, certainly they have to have, some sort of qualifications, but it would be another way of involving our community in these kinds of considerations. So that's my first comment. If there is an answer to that, then go ahead.
Okay, so yes, go ahead, Director Valentine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you and to Councillor Doherty. The councillors picked up on something that was summarized by Mr. McDonald, but also added to the policy through this last iteration, which is it does open the door to those types of ideas very specifically in the policy, whether it's an evaluation panel of some type, like the councillor is suggesting, or whether it's a third-party consultant that can assist to review development applications against the merit-based criteria. So the policy does allow for that type of consideration. And primarily, it was in response to comments from the development community about subjectivity and looking at having a consistent lens or a multi-pronged lens of individuals with a variety of viewpoints looking at the merit-based criteria. So that is an option for the town to pursue in accordance with the policy.
Great, thank you. My next comment had to do with reducing points for transit supportive developments and expanding the definition of proximal. And the only comment that I'll make there is the up to 800 meters distance from a transit hub. I'm assuming when we mean a transit hub that we mean a transit stop and not our downtown central hub. It just occurred to me 800 meters is almost a whole kilometer, which isn't all that terribly close. And I'm just, I'm speaking for myself, I think I would have anticipated seeing a distance less than that. So say 200 to 600 or some such. It seems like a very long distance. And then we've also proposed to add points for economic development impacts and specifically providing points for employment provided or other economic development impacts. And I just would like to ask that it be considered that these should be local jobs. We know that in many developments, a builder will bring his own crew in from out of town, resulting in no jobs for the local community, or at least 5 minutes already? Oh, okay. So that, and also quickly, economic development points granted if materials are purchased locally, or at least some of the building materials are purchased locally, because we also know in many cases they are all purchased from suppliers outside of our community. And those are my 3 comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. So really just would reiterate the Mayor's comments in terms of very supportive and celebrating the staff's work on this file. But it's not just this file. I think it's been transformative in terms of our processes and engagement with the development community and our public going forward on policies. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's absolutely correct. So I just have a quick comment and a question. I also just wanted to say thank you, team, for your hard work on this. We are a growing community, and we like every community, have limited infrastructure. And I'm so proud that we've been able to consult broadly and come up with a policy that is transparent and fair, and that will help us as a growing community deal with all the applications that are streaming through our door. So my question is that, and I was grateful for the comment about ensuring changes of use are picked up properly so that we don't stifle economic development. And I know my question's a little technical, but is our policy broad enough to cover a situation where there's an existing use and there is a Planning Act application to change that use? It might be a rezoning, it might be a variance, it might be a temporary use bylaw. And in the case where there's no additional servicing capacity required, is our policy broad enough to allow that kind of change on a property to occur?
I can try to answer that question right off the top. I did look at that, and I'm thinking that there could be some very minor tweaks to the policy to make it abundantly clear. That's certainly our intent. Our intent is not to frustrate development through this policy process. It is to stimulate and help development along. And we don't want to get in the way of these forms of minor economic development. So it's something I'm certainly more than happy to look at before this comes back to council. If any changes are made, they would be extraordinarily minor and only serve to make that very clear.
Mr. McDonald, certainly appreciate that. All right, so I'm now going to bring this matter to a vote. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. The next staff report is P 2022-07, Authorization Bylaw to execute an amending site plan control agreement, and this is for 84 Hurontario Street, the Regent. File numbers D111421 and D112117. Director Valentine, would you like to do the report on this?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. I will offer some introductory remarks. Community Planner Teakle is here tonight to take committee through a presentation for this relatively straightforward amendment to an existing site plan approval that would assist in the redevelopment of a prominent property in our downtown area. As part of my introduction, I would just note that the proposal is already exempted from the interim control bylaw, and the recommended amendment to the site plan agreement is part of a land sale process with the goal of seeing shovels in the ground in the very near term for this property. Community Planner Tika will also explain the relationship and consistency in the recommendation as it relates to the proposed servicing capacity allocation policy. So with that, Madam Chair, and your concurrence, Community Planner Tika does have a short presentation to share with committee.
Good evening, committee. As Director Valentine mentioned, this is a staff report on a site plan amendment for 84 Hurontario Street. Next slide, please. So the subject property, known as 84 Hurontario Street, is located within the Collingwood Downtown Heritage Conservation District on the west side of Hurontario Street, south of 2nd Street, and immediately north of the CIBC Bank, and abuts town parking lot A to the rear. The property is 0.073 hectares or 0.18 acres in area, and the previously approved development for this site is known as the Regent. Next slide, please. Council approved the site plan for 84 Hurontario Street on October 28, 2019. The approval is for a mixed-use development comprised of 12 apartments and 2 commercial units at grade. 13 underground parking spaces are proposed for the residential units. A heritage permit has been issued for the building. An encroachment agreement is still required as a condition of the site plan agreement to stage construction in a portion of parking lot A. Section 24 of the existing site plan agreement provides 2 years for the development to commence prior to the town being able to, but not required, to terminate the agreement with 60 days notice. The 2 years concluded on October 28, 2021, and the development has still not commenced. The owner is now requesting that Section 24 be extended 1 additional year from the date of the execution of the agreement ending October 28, 2022, to commence construction before the town would again have the option to exercise Section 24 if development had not yet commenced. The property received an exemption to the interim control bylaw in July 2021, and the one-year time frame for the proposed extension is consistent with the provisions of the servicing capacity allocation policy recommended for approval through the previous report, P 2022-08. Next slide, please. No other amendments to the existing approval are requested, and the approved plans for the development would remain unchanged. So this presentation includes the approved elevations for the building. The property is proposed to be sold, and the property is proposed to be sold, and it's a request as part of the purchase and sale agreement. Staff appreciate the owner's request to ensure there is certainty for the purchaser. The owner and purchaser are satisfied with the one-year extension because it is their intent to move to construction quickly. Staff are still in favor of the proposed mixed-use development proceeding, as it would infill an otherwise vacant lot on the town's main street, provide much-needed apartment residential units, and enhance commercial opportunities downtown. The proposal continues to be consistent with and conform to the relevant provincial, county, and town planning policies. Next slide, please. So it's the opinion of planning services staff that this proposed request for a site plan control amendment is appropriate and consistent with and conforms to the relevant provincial policy, the county's official plan, and the town's official plan. As a result, planning services staff recommend that council approve the site plan amendment application number D111421, and that council enact and pass an authorization bylaw to execute an amending site plan control agreement for 84 Hurontario Street, with Section 24 providing an additional 1 year for construction to commence. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Clerk Almas, would there be any members of the public who have any comments?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. Again, if you wish to address the committee regarding this application, please press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. There's no one at this time.
Okay, thank you. I'll get this matter on the floor. That's staff report P 2022-07, authorization bylaw to execute an amending site plan control agreement, 84 Hurontario Street, the Regent, file numbers D111421 and D112117, and that council approve site plan amendment number D111421, and that council enact and pass authorization bylaw to execute amending site plan control agreement for 84 Hurontario Street with Section 24, providing an additional 1 year for construction to commence. Could I have that motion motion moved by Councillor Jeffrey, seconded by Councillor Doherty? Any comments or questions from the committee members? Seeing none, bring this matter to a vote. All those in favor? And that's passed unanimously. Thank you. Next matter on the agenda is P 2022-09, draft plan approval extension request for Red Maple. Director Valentine, would you like to start this one off? Thank you.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. And this report is related to an extension request that would amend the lapsing date for an existing draft approved plan of subdivision known as Red Maple for a period of 3 years. The extension request also provides the opportunity for an evaluation of the proposal in the context of the current land use planning policies and instruments, and allows for the conditions approval to be updated to reflect best practices and standards. As a quick note, a decision on the extension must be made prior to the lapsing date in accordance with the Planning Act, and which in this case is March 25th. And therefore, you might have noted in the staff report that we are recommending the report advance in an accelerated manner to the March 21st council meeting for a decision. We do have Senior Planner Brian here today to review the application and the summary of his report through a presentation. And similar to Community Planner Teakle, he will also take the opportunity to highlight how the proposal sits in relationship to the proposed capacity allocation policy, previous decisions of this council on related developments, and the overall planning merits of the proposal. So with your concurrence, Madam Chair, I would pass the floor to Senior Planner Brian at this time.
Thank you. Go ahead, Senior Planner Brian.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. Okay, Stephanie has started the PowerPoint. Just give me a quick second here. Okay, so next slide, please. Good evening. The Red Maple draft approved plan of subdivision consists of a 17.6 hectare property, municipally addressed as 725 10th line. And this is situated to the north of the Georgian Meadows subdivision, to the west of Black Ash Creek, and to the east of the Blue Mountain Golf and Country Club. The subject lands are designated and zoned for low density and medium density residential uses, and portions of the land are also designated for environmental protection and zoned for environmental protection as well as recreation. Next slide, please. The subdivision proposes 278 residential units, consisting of lots for 131 single detached dwellings, 56 street townhouse dwellings, and a block for 91 condominium townhouse dwellings. The subdivision also includes a number of blocks for parkland, environmental protection, walkways, and servicing purposes. The draft approval was originally given in March of 2013. It was subsequently revised in November of 2014 and has been extended twice, the last being in this time in 2019. The developer, which is a numbered company, 2721733 Ontario Incorporated, has picked up the property from the previous owner and has requested a 3-year extension as the current draft approval lapses on March 25th, 2022. And as I understand it, the property changed ownership in late 2020. Next slide, please. Okay, so given the challenges the municipality is facing with servicing, it's important to view this request in the context of the proposed servicing capacity allocation policy, SCAP, that was discussed earlier this evening. The proposed servicing capacity allocation policy indicates that if lands are subject to draft plan approved plans of subdivision or vacant land condominium descriptions, before the allocation policy comes into effect, the town will seek to amend the conditions of draft approval for all the existing files to confirm that there is no capacity commitment. If uncommitted hydraulic reserve capacity exists within both the water treatment and wastewater treatment plants, the developments would be evaluated against the allocation policy in effect at the time of final approval or registration. So with the immediate action being required tonight, which is, well, it would be, I guess, at the next council meeting on the 21st, given that it lapses on the 25th, the conditions of draft plan approval have been appropriately modified to address servicing capacity allocation challenges. And should the SCAP be approved, servicing capacity allocation would occur at plan registration. And this approach is consistent with how other draft approval extensions have been dealt with over the past year. Next slide, please. So in addition to those servicing capacity allocation matters, other conditions have been modified to keep the draft plan approval current with community values, policy direction, and best practices. Modifications address matters such as phasing, the importance of urban design and architectural control, warning clauses to advise purchasers of potential concerns, construction and communication management plan to better address potential conflicts as the development proceeds, greater clarity around parkland dedication and improvement, and a broader consideration of active transportation. One note that I'll make at this time is that there was a refinement to the phasing conditions, specifically to require that the block containing Taylor's Creek and the Taylor's Creek Trail along the northern portion of the draft plan, there's a requirement that that block be registered as a phase 1 of the subdivision so that the transfer of those lands into town ownership can occur in a more timely manner. Next slide, please. So as noted, the owner has requested an extension of 3 years to March 25th, 2025. This new lapse date is consistent with the approach taken for the other draft approved plans of subdivision and the extensions granted over the past year. And it also includes approvals for the nearby Panorama, formerly Mare Mills Villages, draft approved subdivision, and the Linksview draft approved subdivision that was mentioned earlier this evening. So in combination with Red Maple, these 3 subdivisions do require extension of the trunk water main from 6th Street up the 10th line. And they also require the construction of the Stewart Road booster facility, which is the reservoir and pump station. So the Red Maple draft plan approval extension is aligned with these other draft plan approval extensions. And that alignment would allow for coordination and financing of these needed infrastructure improvements. Next slide, please. So based on the review undertaken with this request, planning services have generally concluded that the Red Maple draft approved plan of subdivision continues to have merit, and that extension to the draft plan approval, subject to the modifications that have been listed, it continues to be appropriate and has planning merit. In general, the development proposal is consistent and conforms with applicable provincial municipal planning policy, including the provincial policy statement, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the Simcoe County official plan, and of course the Collingwood official plan. The lands are already zoned to permit this development. The development would help, as noted on the previous slide, it would help to advance needed servicing, and it would also help to advance transportation and community infrastructure for the area. What's more, it would provide and protect for other community benefits as well. And in this regard, the southeastern corner of the plan was modified with the red line revision back in 2014 to include additional open space above and beyond the parkland requirement, and also had the benefit of protecting additional trees at that location. The development is actively being pursued by the proponents. It is supported by internal and external review partners, so we had no objections received to extending this draft plan approval. And as noted, it contains draft plan conditions that have been modified and or updated to address servicing challenges and best practice. And to conclude, it's appropriate in terms of timing relative to the other developments in the area and the approach that the town has taken with previous draft plan approval extensions. And consequently, last slide, please. Planning Services recommendation is essentially that council approve a 3-year extension of the draft approval for the Red Maple plan of subdivision, including amendments to the associated conditions of draft plan approval as contained in Appendix B to the report, with a lapsing date revised to March 25th, 2025. And as Director Valentine noted, part of the recommendation is also that this report be considered at the March 21st, 2022 meeting of council, given the pending lapse date of March 25th, 2022. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Clerk Almas, would there be any members of the public who wish to address the committee at this time?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. And again, press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen if you wish to address the committee. There's no interest at this time.
Thank you.
I spoke too soon. My
Okay, there's a
apologies.
hand.
We do
And there's a person. Okay.
have John Welton.
Mr. Welton, go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
I just wanted to clarify, it seemed that Planner Bryans was initially saying that the allocation would come at land registration. And I'm just trying to clarify if there's already an allocation for this property that's being extended. That's my question.
Okay, thank you. Director Valentine, could you answer that question, please. Thank you.
Yes, certainly, Madam Chair, through you to Mr. Welton. Senior Planner Brian's presentation was quite correct that this process aligns with the proposed servicing capacity allocations policy, which is for existing draft approved plans of subdivision, the allocation would occur at the time of registration. So although this application is being recommended for extension, it does not carry with it a capacity allocation commitment until the time of registration, where the plan would be evaluated against the merit-based criteria, which is consistent with the policy recommendations in the servicing capacity allocation framework.
Thank you. Do you have any further comments, Mr. Welton?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, at this point, there's no one else, Clerk Thomas? No, thank you. Okay, at this point, we'll get this on the floor. So the resolution is that staff report P 2022-09 draft plan approval extension request, Red Maple, be received. And further, that council approve a 3-year extension of draft approval for the Red Maple plan of subdivision, including amendments to the associated conditions of draft approval as contained in Appendix B to this report, with a lapsing date of March 25, 2025. And further, that given the pending lapse date of March 25, 2022, this report be considered at the March 21, 2022 meeting of council. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Hall, Mayor Saunderson, thank you. Any questions or comments from members of the committee? Mayor Saunderson, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Welton, for your question. That helped to clarify an issue for me as well. And this is a question to, just through you to staff. I don't know who wants to take this question, but it seems to me that, and I've said this before, so maybe I'm sounding like a broken record, but it seems to me we have an opportunity to distinguish Collingwood as a conservation and sustainable community as a result of the issues that we've had. And so I'm very much in favor of us trying to push or work with developers to look at stormwater harvesting. So again, I understand that 1/3 of our household fresh water goes down the toilet. So we could save 1/3 of our purified water. Based on weather events and storm events, we should storm water, and at the same time work to, in these subdivisions, to provide stormwater management. So I'm just wondering, how would that process look, and in terms of dealing with proponents to get this on the table and move this discussion forward?
Who would like to answer that question? Go ahead, Director Slamma.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. I'll give it a shot. Through you to Mayor Saunderson. So currently, when subdivisions come for and have submit a planning application for development, the way we look at stormwater is that the development must contain the stormwater within its own lands and manage it so that no additional stormwater is leaving those lands from their initial condition. So what I'm hearing you suggest is potentially looking at a change to our engineering standards, potentially that goes beyond that pre to post review of stormwater and incorporating actually some reduction. Would that be correct?
Yes, that would be correct, and I guess it is also self-serving for the developers because this would get them points on our merit-based system, and so it addresses a number of issues for everyone.
Okay, so Manager Velick isn't with us this evening, so this is something that I would like to have a conversation with him about how we could consider it within our standards. For this development in particular, I'd look to Senior Planner Brian, but this development has already submitted some engineering design, so it may be this development might be too far down the path, but this could be something we consider for a future review.
Any follow-up, Mayor Saunderson?
I know staff has been extremely busy, but I'm just wondering if we can, when this allocation framework goes in place, all going well, will be after March 29th, I think, or April. What am I looking at? What's the timeline? Sorry, March? So I guess I'm wondering if it's possible, and I'll look to staff if they want direction, but I'm wondering if it's possible that we couldn't put some thought to that process so that we have this a mechanism in place so that once the merit-based allocation system is in place, that we can then start working with our proponents or applicants to look at how they could implement that. And I'd look to staff for some direction about what would be necessary, I guess, and then I might put a motion on the table.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like it might require a motion. Clerk Almas, do you have any thoughts on how this should proceed?
Certainly, a motion would be required, Chair Hamlin, for such a change. I guess if you're wanting it in light of this application, I believe this one includes. So this one is coming back on the agenda for Monday. So are you looking at it as an amendment to this motion for this one, or putting forward basically a notice of motion?
I think it's a notice of motion in the larger picture, but I would hope that it would catch this one as particular development. I'm hoping it would catch all proponents once we lift the ICBL, or soon thereafter as we can get it in place.
We can record for later in the meeting under other business a notice of motion, and then pending what Director Valentine is able to incorporate in a report prior to that. It should actually also probably include the amendment too, if you're looking for adding that direction into the current staff report.
Into this one as well? Okay, well then I guess at this point I'd move an amendment that that it would take into consideration the stormwater harvesting proposal that I'll bring forward later, or be subject to if should that proposal go forward. That works.
Yes, Councillor Jeff. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just seconding it.
Oh, you're seconding it. Okay, thank you. Okay, so before we vote on that, are there any other comments from the committee? Yes, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chair. And through you to Manager Brian, this, what we are endeavoring to move forward by next week does not include consideration of the condominium block. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Doherty, there's no development proposal for the condominium block at present. The draft approval would simply, further to eventual registration of the plan, would create the block on which a condominium development could be considered. We would anticipate that at some point in the future, a site plan control application would be made for that condominium block, and then there would be the opportunity to review the proposal through that process.
Okay, thank you. And where I was going with this, and Manager Brian and I were trying to correspond about this late this afternoon, but I think I'm not alone among members of council who have some concern about the continued proliferation of condominium developments just because of the potential way down the road liabilities either for the owners, the condominium corporation, or the town relative to the infrastructure. And so, and you may not be able to answer this question, but my thought was if there was any opportunity at this point in time for the developer to make modifications to the draft, to remove that or to at least to remove the necessity for a condominium in that block 192. And one of the thoughts that I had was because we are pursuing traffic calming as an updated condition, which is yay, if there was an opportunity through road narrowing of the roads that are presently showing throughout the plan to create more room within that block 192 so that condominium style infrastructure does not need to go in there. That sounds terribly circular, sorry, but is there an opportunity at this point in time to review any of the elements of the layout of the development?
Senior Planner Brian, would you like to address that?
Yes, I would, Chair Hamlin. At this point, given the pending lapse date, there would be insufficient time to consider the kind of changes that Councillor Doherty is suggesting tonight. And I guess I'd also add that the applicant had made the request for the draft plan approval extension, and there was, as part of that process, there was no request on their part to alter the configuration of their plan, and there was no significant consideration on the part of staff to review the configuration. It was more in terms of is this current configuration appropriate to extend approval for another 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
I think Director Valentine, would you like to add a comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if I may just pile on to Senior Planner Brian's quite astute observations, is that the development of the block, which was referenced by Councillor Doherty, the future condominium block, would require future Planning Act applications, whether it does go forward with a condominium, which may or may not happen. There's nothing within this draft approval, unless Senior Planner Brian is going to correct me, that requires the developer to move forward with a condominium application. But should one come in, there will be an opportunity to evaluate the proposal, and there will be a decision point for this committee and council at that time, and to make suggestions about the layout, et cetera, of that block. Should it not proceed by condominium, again, there'll be another opportunity through site plan control for this council to take a look at the development configuration on that block. As Senior Planner Brian noted, this subdivision would facilitate the creation of the parcel, but there are further details to be worked out on how it gets developed, and there are future Planning Act applications associated with that decision process.
Okay, that's great. That suggests to me that we can fight another day on that. Well, not fight, but we can look at this another day. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? I have just two. One of the conditions, number 13, mentions that on-street cycling facilities will be included in the subdivision agreement to the satisfaction of the town. And I know that the draft plan doesn't, isn't in the detail needed to show those kind of facilities. Can we expect that staff will be looking at providing some on-street cycling facilities in this area? Senior Planner Bryant?
Yes, Chair Hamlin, the draft plan wouldn't at this stage include any on-street cycling facilities, but we have reviewed the cycling plan, and the cycling plan does identify that bicycle lanes. The cycling plan is a little bit confusing because it actually shows the route that would require bicycle lanes slightly further to the north, but as far as we can figure out, it in fact reflects the east-west Street A and its ability to, the opportunity to potentially cross the Black Ash Creek and then have it hook into eventually 3rd Street. So that opportunity has been identified in the cycling plan, and through detailed design considerations, those kind of facilities would be part of the process, the review process, to consider whether they would be appropriate or not. And in addition to that, that Street A, the main east-west street through the Red Maple subdivision, does have a right-of-way width of 26 meters, which would accommodate a collector road. And we have considered the possibility of working in bicycle lanes in similar circumstances elsewhere. So those would definitely be part of the future conversation.
Okay, thank you very much. So my other question is with respect to that Street A and the block that's shown there, which is 197. And this is the block that would allow for the future connection of this subdivision and Concession Road 10 over through the regional center, so-called, across 3rd Street and hooking finally into the Pretty River Parkway. This has not been shown on any official plan that we have in effect yet. And I know that this discussion isn't the time to, address that. You can tell from my remarks I would not be in favor of a major east-west collector road through town that included 3rd Street. So my question is, though, will this be something that will be discussed during the draft plan review?
To answer your question, Chair Hamlin, there are a lot of pieces that would have to fall into place to make that kind of connection happen. That block 197 that you referred to, it is needed to facilitate water and wastewater servicing connections to infrastructure that's already in place in the Black Ash Creek sort of corridor. The block does provide an opportunity for that kind of connection, but you're quite right. The official plan does not currently identify that as a location for a collector road. That's something that would have to be considered as part of the official plan update. And the draft plan approval extension that's being considered here tonight does not require that connection to be made. It simply provides a block such that that opportunity can exist for consideration in the future.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. Okay, seeing no other questions from this committee, I'll bring this matter to a vote. All those in favor? Oh, sorry. Sorry, I forgot. Our mayor has an amendment on the floor that has been seconded. So I believe we vote on the amendment first. Any comments or questions on the amendment?
Could you just have it read in again?
Yes, Clerk Almas, could you please read the proposed amendment?
So that the report be amended to take into consideration stormwater harvesting proposal.
right?
Yes, that's right. And then
Okay.
I will bring my notice of motion about the stormwater harvesting under other business, so it would be subject to that notice.
Okay. Okay, seeing no other questions or comments, we'll vote on the amendment then. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. And then we'll now vote on the main motion. All those in favor? And that's also unanimous. Thank you. The next staff report, this is item 7.4 on the agenda. P 2022-10, authorization bylaw to execute an amending site plan control agreement. This is with respect to 120 Hume Street, town file number D11222. Who would be taking the lead? Are you going to, I assume then, Director Valentine, you'll do the introduction for this. Thank you.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. This is our fourth and final of the land use planning reports before you tonight, and the discussion wouldn't be complete without bringing in Manager Ayres, who is here to take us through a presentation for a site plan approval amendment that would facilitate the creation of an accessory residential dwelling unit on a commercial property. While the property is already exempted from the interim control bylaw and a minor variance was recently approved, this is the final step which is necessary to allow the project to proceed. This proposal has represented a very interesting learning experience for staff who have made several observations and notes on how the overall process and associated bylaws could be improved or streamlined to make it easier for property owners to develop accessory residential units. So just wanted to bring it to committee's attention that we are tracking those issues and concerns for future consideration through the Affordable Housing Master Plan, the zoning bylaw review, or if we can, even earlier, once an affordable housing specialist is onboarded. With this particular proposal, Manager Ayres will note some relatively unique circumstances related to parkland dedication that may merit some more immediate action from committee and council. And in addition to her in-depth staff report, which is before you, Manager Ayres would now be prepared to summarize the proposal through a brief presentation, Madam Chair.
Thank you and good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. As Director Valentine indicated, I'm going to provide a brief overview of the proposed amending site plan control agreement for 120 Hume Street this evening. I also confirm that the proposed development was granted an exemption to the provisions of interim control bylaw number 2021-24 on February 22nd, 2022, and a total of 0.66 single dwelling unit equivalents of water have been allocated for the proposed development. Next slide, please. So this is an aerial image, a 2018 aerial image of the subject lands, which are located on the south side of Hume Street, opposite of Market Street. Surrounding land uses include commercial uses to the east, west, and north, and residential uses, primarily single detached dwellings, to the south. Next slide, please. So this is a photo of 120 Hume Street with portions of the adjacent commercial properties to the east and west. A portion of the detached accessory building where the development is proposed is visible at the rear of the property. Next slide, please. So this property was the subject of a site plan control agreement in 2006, and the proposed amendment before committee's consideration this evening involves the construction of an 80 square meter or 861 square foot second story addition to an existing single story detached accessory commercial building located at the rear of the property to create one accessory residential apartment unit. A total of 5 surface parking spaces are provided, including 1 parking space in the detached garage to support both the existing business office use and the proposed residential dwelling unit. And I also confirm that all existing landscaping is to remain on the subject property. The proposed development is consistent with and in conformity with all of the applicable planning instruments outlined in the staff report, with the exception of 2 non-conforming setbacks that were the subject of a recent minor variance application. The interior side yard and rear yard setbacks of the existing detached accessory building do not conform to the town's current zoning provisions. In order to facilitate the second-story addition, a minor variance application was considered by the Committee of Adjustment on February 24th, 2022, and the minor variance was provisionally granted. The minor variance is currently subject to a 20-day appeal period, with the deadline for appeals being today. Planning Services confirms that no appeals have been submitted to date. The proposed site plan amendment was circulated to town departments and external commenting agencies, and there were no objections to the proposal. Next slide, please. So the second-story addition is proposed to be accommodated through the construction of 2 shed dormers located in the center of the existing structure, as you can see on the slide in front of you. It is anticipated that the majority of the addition will be concealed by the existing 2-story main commercial building, and the existing detached accessory building is currently comprised of painted concrete block. The proposal is to clad the entire facade of the building in composite cladding in a smoke timber color that would complement both the adjacent red brick commercial building to the east, as well as the existing main commercial building. Next slide, please. So the recommendation before the committee this evening is that council approve site plan amendment application file number D11222, and that council enact and pass an authorization bylaw to execute an amending site plan control agreement for the development of a dwelling unit in a portion of a detached accessory commercial building on the property municipally addressed as 120 Hume Street. The amending site plan control agreement requires payment of a $5,000 administrative and legal deposit, a $4,000 engineering services fee, and approximately $9,000 in securities. Payment of these financial requirements is required prior to council's consideration of the file on March 28th, 2022. With regards to payment of cash in lieu of parkland dedication, the development proposal represents an increase to the density of the development. As such, per the town's parkland dedication bylaw number 04-63, cash in lieu of parkland dedication is required prior to issuance of the first building permit. Cash in lieu of parkland is calculated at a rate of 2% of the value of the land for commercial purposes and 5% of the value of the land for residential development. Planning Services notes that the original site plan agreement required payment of $3,980, representing 2% of the appraised value of the subject lands for the commercial development in 2006. Given the proposal is to add a residential apartment dwelling unit to the subject property, the calculation for cash in lieu of parkland would be 5% of the difference between the appraised value of lands before the commencement of the proposed development and the estimated value of the lands with the development completed. Appraisals are to be completed at the owner's expense by an individual who holds a designation from the Appraisal Institute of Canada. The owner has expressed some concern regarding the requirement to hire a certified appraiser, given the relatively minor scope of the proposed development. And I understand the owner and/or their representatives are in attendance this evening to request committee's consideration of an alternative method of calculating cash in lieu of parkland for this particular development proposal. Planning Services notes that cash in lieu of parkland dedication is not typically required for the creation of second units or accessory apartments on residential properties, and that the proposed creation of an apartment unit on the subject property satisfies many of the town's affordable housing policies with respect to accessory apartments and secondary units. So this concludes my presentation of the file. I'm available to answer any questions, and as I previously mentioned, I understand the owner and/or their representatives are also in attendance this evening, should members of the committee have any specific questions for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Ayers. And Clerk Almas, I think we have someone in the audience to speak to us this evening.
We do, Chair Hamlin. We have Michelle Cutts. I'd like to address the application on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Cutts.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak to this application this evening. I just want to start off by, I'll introduce myself. I'm Michelle Cutts of Rudy and Associates. It's a good place to start. And I'm representing the owners of 120 Hume Street, being Jane and Mark Palmer. So just before we get into the cash in lieu and our concerns there and our, I guess, essentially our ask from council, I just want to compliment Town of Collingwood staff and how wonderful they've been to work with and how much they've helped sort of push this through, working on some tight timeframes. I understand Lindsay's been burning the midnight oil, I think, on some of her applications. So we really do appreciate that and just want to recognize town staff. Just as a quick update on this file, we will be looking to have a building permit submitted by tomorrow. And this, again, is to ensure that construction can begin as soon as possible. We do have an exemption to the ICBL, and as everyone knows, that's an April 26th deadline. We're looking to have a building permit in hand and be constructing this accessory dwelling prior to that. So just quickly, as Lindsay has indicated, and at page 11 of the staff report, the cash in lieu is not typically required for residential accessory units, but because this property falls within the commercial zoning and is subject to site plan control, it does trigger that cash in lieu. The cash in lieu presents a bit of a timing issue and a large financial outpour, I guess, for this development, considering it's so small, and is something that is actually encouraged by the town, by the county, and by just the province in general, having rental housing. So we're here this evening looking to council to work with us in order to calculate cash in lieu in a different manner, and in a manner that would be, number one, would be faster than hiring an appraiser, and would allow us to move forward without actually having to hire an appraiser for such a small development. So what we're proposing is, if the clerk could just bring up slide 5 of Lindsay's staff report, that would be great. Just to explain sort of, is that possible?
Clerk Gomez?
Sorry, just for clarification, of the staff report or of the presentation?
Oh, I'm sorry. Slide 5 of the presentation.
Thank you.
Just back one, thank you very much. Thank you. So I just wanted to provide a visual as to while I sort of walk through what we're proposing here. And again, the reason for proposing this is to be able to move forward in an expedited manner, in a manner that we feel reasonable for the size of development that's occurring on the site, with regards to cash in lieu. So as you can see, and as Lindsay had described, there are a dormer shed that would be the addition of livable area to the property, to the existing accessory structure. We're presenting the option to actually calculate the cost to build the additional living area and to take 5% of that. This would, the building is in existence. The main floor is already there. The garage is already there. So we think it would be appropriate in this circumstance to take that additional floor living area and to take 5% of that. Again, I can give the actual numbers. We have a quote from the building, from the builder, sorry, of approximately $60,000, which at 5% would represent a cash in lieu payment of $3,000. Now that's very, very close to the original cash in lieu that has already been paid for this site, which we feel would be quite reasonable in this scenario. Again, proceeding with this calculation would reduce the consulting fees by not having to hire an appraiser. It would reduce the time to permit the building permit to go forward, as appraisals can take several weeks to complete, especially in this environment. It provides a cash in lieu fee in addition to fees already paid that we find quite reasonable. And it does encourage accessory residential units to be established on commercial properties, as well as residential, establishing a mixed use scenario, which is a sought after thing in the town, the county, and the province. I'm available for any questions. If through you, Madam Chair, anyone has any questions regarding our ask this evening.
All right, well, thank you. Well, Ms. Cutts is here. Would anyone like to pose a question to her? No, I think you've done a great job, and there's no questions, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else, Clerk Almas? No, okay. So I'll put this matter on the floor by reading in that Staff Report P 2022-10, Authorization Bylaw to execute an amending site plan control agreement, 120 Hume Street, be received, and that Council approve site plan amendment application file number D11222, and that Council enact and pass an authorization bylaw to execute an amending site plan control agreement for the development of a dwelling unit in a portion of a detached accessory commercial building at the property municipally addressed as 120 Hume Street. And I have Councillor Jeffrey moving and Mayor Saunderson seconding that. And Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you very much, Chair Hamlin. I agree that this is an important thing for us to be doing, given our situation in terms of being able to provide housing. And I would propose an amendment, and further that an alternate method of calculating the cash in lieu of parkland dedication satisfactory to the Director of Planning be applied.
Okay, thank you. Could I have a seconder? And that's Councillor Doherty. Thank you. Would any members of council, or of this committee, I should say, have any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll vote on the amendment. Does anyone need that read in again? No. All in favor of the amendment? And that's unanimous. And now we'll vote on the main motion. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. I think now before we move in, so thank you, Manager Ayers, for your presentation. And I think now before we move into the Public Works reports, we'll take a 10-minute break. I have the time as 7:38, so we'll see us back here at 7:48. Thank you. All right, we'll just reconvene this meeting now, and we're at item 7.5 of our agenda. And this item is PW 2022-07, temporary additional membrane treatment capacity. And I understand that Director Slamma is going to address us, followed by Manager McGinnity. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. This staff report and presentation before you this evening is related to the option of installing temporary or mobile membrane units at the water treatment plant until the water treatment plant expansion is completed and commissioned. So this report is being brought forward following discussions that we had with Council in the summer last year, where we were considering options to augment our supply until the water treatment plant completion, or as with the UV disinfection installation, just regain our lost capacity in the winter. So I will pass this over to Manager McGinnity, who will walk us through the presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Director Slamma. So if we can advance to the next slide. As the committee is aware, our Collingwood water treatment plant is currently operating at approximately 80% of its rated treatment capacity. And the design of the water treatment plant expansion and upgrade started in July of 2021. We have limited remaining water supply capacity available to support new development until the expansion is complete. And so we are continuing to explore or have explored options to increase available water supply capacity as part of the design scope of work for our engineering team prior to the commissioning of the expanded water treatment plant. Next slide. As the interim UV disinfection has already been added to the scope of the water treatment plant project, this option warranted further investigation to determine if it may fully meet the projected water supply needs for the town until the expanded water treatment plant is commissioned. And the other two options that were analyzed further are following through on the plan to reduce Collingwood's supply commitment to our customer municipalities and adding a portable membrane filtration mobile unit to the water treatment plant to further increase the rated treatment plant capacity in conjunction with the interim UV. Next slide. If no additional development is allocated water supply capacity between the now and the end of 2022, when the interim UV is scheduled to be commissioned and online, the water supply capacity available until expansion could increase to 3,268 cubic meters per day, or 1,711 cubic meters per day if a 5% factor of safety is applied. This translates into approximately 2,450 SDUs, or 1,282 SDUs with a 5% factor of safety. However, when development water supply requirements are forecasted based on proposals that have already been submitted to the town, it does not appear that the addition of UV disinfection will ensure sufficient water supply capacity through the construction and commissioning of the water treatment plant. Next slide. Staff has heard from developers and council that Collingwood development growth is potentially being stifled while we wait for the expansion. So we felt it was important to consider a reduction in water supply to our customer municipalities during this 4-year period when we are managing Collingwood's development capacity allotments. The proposed reduced supply commitments to the customer municipalities results in a shared impact to them both, but phased over 3 years from 2022 to 2024 as shown in this table. The proposed reduction accounts for up to an additional 825 SDUs of available allocation for Collingwood. However, any reduction in supply will need to be negotiated with the individual municipalities. Currently, the town does not have a supply agreement with New Tecumseh, and the proposed interim reductions have been presented in the draft new water supply agreement. The town does have a valid supply agreement with the town of Blue Mountains that includes a minimum of 1,250 cubic meters of capacity, to which the town of Blue Mountains contributed capital funding. Any reduction in this supply would need to be negotiated and agreed upon with the town of Blue Mountains. Next slide. The proposed water supply commitment reductions would result in a projected water supply deficit of approximately 58 SDUs around the time of the water treatment plant expansion commissioning. But since this is just a projection based on the best information available at this time, it appears to be within a range that can be managed by the town through a water allocation policy. It is important to note that the town intends to complete semi-annual reports on remaining available water supply allocation, so the proposed reductions to customer municipalities can be reconsidered in the future if required. Next slide. When evaluating the option of adding temporary membrane mobile unit at the water treatment plant, benefits seem obvious. We can add it to the engineer scope of work for the treatment plant expansion project. The rated treatment plant capacity will be increased to make significantly more water supply capacity available to development in Collingwood. And there's also the benefit of improved redundancy with our existing membrane treatment process. The challenges are a little less obvious, but are very important to this discussion. The addition of a temporary membrane mobile unit will add significant challenges to the constructability of the water treatment plant expansion. Not only will we need to find space and work around the membrane unit, there will be a network of pipes and other equipment needed to support them. There are also very few membrane mobile units available for rental, so the decision to enter into a rental agreement would need to be made well in advance and could also be impacted if another customer who already has a unit installed requires it for a longer period of time. The addition of these units would also require an amendment to our Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks approvals for operating the water treatment plant. And on the whole, it will add another layer of complexity to the expansion project, which could result in other tasks for that project being delayed due to the change of focus. While we do have membrane filtration at the water treatment plant already, the membrane mobile unit may not be the same type of membrane that we currently use and would require additional training and also operating time for the operations team. The total cost to implement this option will be dependent on the rental time, but is projected to be in the $3 million range if a decision is made to move forward with this option by the end of 2022. Next slide. As the membrane mobile units are only available in 5,000 cubic meter per day production capacities, the addition of one of the units at the water treatment plant would significantly increase the available water supply capacity to a level well above what the town projects is required prior to the scheduled commissioning of the expanded water treatment plant. Next slide. So based on the outcome of this assessment, it is recommended that staff continue to move forward with the interim UV disinfection, start reducing supply commitments to customer municipalities, and continue to work on a water allocation policy to ensure the remaining water supply capacity is not overcommitted through the commissioning of the water treatment plant expansion. That's next slide. And that's all. So we'd be happy to answer any questions of the committee at this time.
I'll firstly ask Clerk Almas if there's any members of the public wishing to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. Yes, we have Bob Tyson wishing to address the committee.
Thank you. Mr. Tyson, please go ahead.
No, sorry. I don't know what happened. I must have pressed the wrong button.
Okay, that's not a problem. Thank you. Clerk Almas, would there be anyone else? No. Okay. So at this point, I'll read in the resolution that staff report PW 2022-07, temporary additional membrane treatment capacity be received for information. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Doherty, Deputy Mayor Hall, thank you. And members of the committee, would you have any questions or comments? Mayor Saunderson, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to either Director Slamma or Manager McGinnity. I guess I'm wanting to get a sense of the timeline. If we, you indicated the end of 2022 seemed to be a critical phase. We might have more information by then. If we were to look at ordering one of these units, when would that have to be done by?
Manager McGinnity, do you have that answer?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. It's a decision we'd want to make as soon as possible. As I mentioned, there are very few units available. We could make it at any time. If we chose not to make it at this time, we could delay it to next year, but that may impact our ability to have a unit available in the timelines that we desire. So if it's the desire of this committee or council that's something that we should be proceeding with, we would want to start incorporating that into our project as soon as possible.
Okay, and then if I could, by way of follow-up, I know we're still working with our customer municipalities about reducing our water commitment to them. And I'm wondering if it would make sense in those discussions to make them aware of this opportunity and a cost-sharing arrangement. In other words, if they don't want to entertain the reductions in what we're giving or sending to them, would they consider then a proportionate cost-sharing arrangement for this type, the additional trains, filtration units?
Who would like to answer that question? Go ahead, yes, go ahead, Director Slamma.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mayor Saunderson. Certainly that is a potential. There is an option to engage our customer municipalities and see if there's any interest in sharing in the cost of this unit. From staff's perspective, we have recommended not moving forward with this option, as we feel that we've been able to demonstrate through our extensive analysis that there is water available for Collingwood's development. We have spoken, we've heard from the development community and from some of our residents about the alternative of our customer municipalities sharing in some restrictions to developments, I guess. And although I would note that those municipalities have also have their own sorts of allocation policies. But I think from a staff's perspective, this unit or having this unit on site will really introduce a lot of complexities as we're physically working around our site and, working with an intent to expedite the completion of our water treatment plant expansion. And there is some concern that, having this additional unit could add to some delays in the completion of the construction or commissioning of the plant. And so weighing, that potential against the option of not having this mobile unit, that's really, that's a big part of staff's recommendation here this evening. So I wanted to say all that for your consideration.
And I appreciate that information. I guess part of my concern is we have delays from other issues outside of our control, and it takes us late into 2026 or beyond. And something like this does help to buy you additional time, but it sounds to me like you have to. There's a bit of crystal ball gazing here, because if you don't order these things in time, you're not going to get them, and then maybe you become aware of an issue beyond that time frame. So I guess if I had a comment, and I'll hear what other council members say, but I would maybe consider a direction for our staff in terms of our discussions with our municipal customers, in terms of their interest in exploring this option, and have a report back later to council in the fall or whenever it becomes available for staff, in terms of our discussions with our municipal customers, to get a sense of where we stand on that. So those are my questions for now, and I may bring an amendment based on other comments around the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to add a comment? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Director Slamma. I am inclined to support your recommendations. It seems like an awful lot of money to be, in my view, throwing away. Because it is not going to be part of our larger completed water treatment plant. If we are able to negotiate modest reductions to the other municipal partners, then it seems to me that we'll be able to manage all of our immediate demand. And we're also prioritizing our own residents first. So I'm very comfortable with the staff recommendation here.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. So I think we don't have to be so definitive as to one or the other. I think what staff said to us is there's a 1-year opportunity to revisit, and I guess I would support the mayor's amendment in terms of just being worded that staff would revisit this and definitely come back to council confirming or revising this recommendation tonight. Best approach.
Thank you. Any further comments? My own comment is I'm happy to have this come back, but I must say that in the overall scheme, I think to me what's most important is we don't throw the construction of our plant addition off schedule. And this sounds to me like a major project with pipes and lots of moving parts that could impact that. And without having, without redesigning our plant and all the other factors that might come into it to implement this, and all the delays to construction by adding additional construction, I would want that to be included in any analysis. It isn't just, to my mind, a money issue who pays. And I think it's critical to get this new plant up. Thank you. All right. Would you like to? Oh, go ahead, Deputy Mayor Hall.
I'd like to ask the following from a position of pure ignorance, and that is through you to staff. We're looking at potentially a one-year window of opportunity, and the comment was made during the presentation that there's not a lot of these sitting around in terms of pieces of equipment, and they're subject to availability. So the question is, are we actively monitoring that availability? And therefore, should that availability become scarce, would there be an effort brought forward to bring this back to council?
Thank you. Would someone like to answer that question?
Yeah, Chair Hamlin, I'll ask Manager McGinnity to answer that question, please. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Deputy Mayor Hall, I would say they're already scarce. So if this is something that we wanted to move forward with, I would like us, I don't know that there's any just sitting around waiting to be spoken for. We just basically have to get our name on the list and when they're available. So if we wanted one a year from now, hopefully one would be available a year from now. I'm not aware of any that are just kind of sitting around unused at the moment.
Follow up?
So what's the implication of just putting a name on a list? And again, pure ignorance, but I have a 4-year lease on a Highlander, and I've got my name in on one that may be becoming available a year from now. So is there...
I guess we'd like to know, if I can paraphrase, is there a cost involved in getting our name on the list? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair. So, I mean, it's more than just putting our name on the list. It's making a decision to move forward with a design, amendments to permits and approvals to how we're going to operate the facility. Because if we wanted it a year from now and it was suddenly available, we wouldn't be able to just come and connect it and operate it. So it's kind of making that decision and moving forward and making that commitment that this is something that we wanted to move forward with and planning for it.
Any follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion to go on the floor?
Yes, hearing all of the commentary, I guess what I would, my emotion really is in addition to receiving us for information, is that staff in conversation with our municipal customers put this potentiality on the floor, and that come back. I'm mindful of the time and all the other moving parts in this process, but I wouldn't want to close the door without one further opportunity, I think, for this council to consider the option in light of everything that's going on and any other potential new developments. But that's, I don't know if that's sufficiently clear for you, clear comments. Well, I think the timeline I saw end of 2022 in the presentation, so I would hope it would come back before the end of 2022 for council to reconsider in light of the results of that.
Okay, and I have a seconder with Councillor Jeffrey. Okay, I have a question of staff relating to that motion, if I may. I guess by the end of 2022 or earlier, I guess we could have an answer earlier. if you're finalizing the agreement. Yes, Director Slamma, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. Yes, I think we would be looking to have this conversation with our customer municipalities as soon as possible, as the complexities that Manager McGinnity commented on, right? This is a decision we need to make sooner and later so that adjustments or the unit can be incorporated into the design of the facility.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other comments? No. Okay, all those in favor? Is that a no?
Of the amendment, right?
Of the amendment? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a no.
But your hand holding up a no. Okay, all those in favor? That passes. Thank you. All right. And so now we have the main motion. All those in favor? And that passes. Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is 7.6, and that is C2022-12 Mountain Road Widening Project, Parts 3, 4, and 5, Plan 51R 43339 to be assumed as part of a public highway. That staff reports, that the staff report for that, which I've just read, be assumed as part of a public highway be received, and that bylaw number 2022-016, a bylaw to assume parts 3, 4, and 5 of reference plan 51R 4339 as part of Mountain Road, Collingwood, be enacted and passed on the 28th day of March 2022. Who'll be taking the lead on this? That would be Clerk Almas. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a brief PowerPoint presentation. It's basically just 2 slides indicating the location of the property. So engineering services continues to negotiate with property owners along Mountain Road for small strips of land adjacent to the roadway to accommodate the road widening to 5 lanes in the future. This is one of the properties, if we go to the next slide. And the reason why this is coming out of turn is that they actually put in part of their condition to for us to acquire the property, that they were wanting it to be completed as soon as possible, ensuring that it is registered on title and the protection of their entrance to their lane is secured in the event that the road widening doesn't occur in the future. So again, this is at the intersection along Mountain Road in front of Ignora, and you can see the small arrow that's going vertical by the Part 4 and Part 3, and that is where they have their current roadway that accesses the rear of their property. And we can see it on the next slide with the aerial overlay. So they've requested it be presented in advance of the future staff report that will be coming forward on the remaining properties, and that's why it's before you this evening. And that is it.
Okay, thank you for that. Would there be any members of the public who wish to address the committee on this matter?
There is not at this time, Chair Hammond.
Okay, thank you. Any members of the committee have any comments? Nope. And I can't remember. Have I asked for a mover and a seconder? No, mover and a seconder. Deputy Mayor Hall and Councillor Doherty. There's no comments. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 7.7, this is with respect to FS 2022-02, expansion of seasonal paid parking. I believe, okay, who's going to be addressing the committee on this matter?
Through you, Chair Hamlin, I'll just introduce the project. We decided it was better to bring it back to DNO. The original one was passed and put forward and in progress and has been successful. So going forward, we thought this was the best place to present the paid parking, expansion of paid parking program. Acting Manager Harold has been doing an awesome job on this, did a lot of work moving this forward with help from Parks, Rec and Culture, Dean Culver. So I'll let Adam take over, and hopefully you will appreciate Adam's presentation tonight.
Thank you.
So good evening, Chair Hamlin, Mayor Saunderson, and members of council. Thanks for having me here tonight, and I'll try to make this as short as possible because I know you've had a long night. So the purpose of the report in front of you is to update council on the implementation of paid parking at Sunset Point and Princeton Shores, and to also seek council approval on the expansion of paid parking at the Collingwood Harbor as well as Millennium Park. So next slide, please. So just to give you a bit of a background, in 2020, we launched the paid parking pilot project. This was launched at Sunset Point. It was a six-week pilot project where we implemented paid parking. Residents were able to park for free, as they were able to in 2021 and as they will be in 2022. So in 2021, we actually implemented on a permanent basis at Sunset Point and Princeton Shores, and we monitored the other waterfront areas, the harbor and Millennium Park. So this year, we're looking to expand seasonal paid parking to include those areas. Next slide, please. So just to give you a summary of the paid parking in 2021. Overall, I think we accomplished our goals. We reduced we reduced parking and traffic flow issues. A lot of residents were very happy with the parking being instituted at these parks, as it led to people being able to find parking spaces. It also generated over 400,000 on about 18 weeks, and a list of kind of the areas where it generated the funds, the most coming from the machines and hotspot itself, the signs. During this 2021 period, we issued over 5,200 seasonal residential permits, as well as over 4,000 parking tickets. There's about a 60% compliance rate, and we also realized that more resources were needed. And just to comment on the money that was generated, of that $400,000, about $50,000 was needed for 25 floor parking machines, as well as the additional summer students as well. Next slide, please. So some bylaw stats from 2020 to actually it goes from 2017 to 2021, but essentially what I'm trying to highlight here is the number of occurrences that occurred between 2020 and 2021. Essentially, we doubled our workload as a result of implementation of paid parking at these parks. And this can kind of be broken down, these stats anyways, based on like we received complaints, disputes, people claiming that they had paid for parking. Maybe they got a ticket because they had some issue with the machine, maybe an input error when they entered the license plate. Inquiries and kind of requests for assistance. Next slide, please. So this is kind of some stats that because customer service was involved in this and helping out with the permits, registering residents and non-residents for seasonal permits. You can see here kind of in May and June, they saw a substantial increase in the number of kind of calls for relating to parking. So they supported people with their online permits, again, helped to resolve any parking disputes, kind of general complaints, as well as inquiries. Next slide, please. So kind of what we learned in 2021, Additional seasonal staff members are needed to support the waterfront parking program. We needed a streamlined permit process, kind of a one-step process for residents. So essentially you submit your documents and get approved. Last year we had an issue where residents had to submit their documents and then go in and actually obtain their permit. So this year it's a one-step process. Education and awareness are critical. So we intend to be adding some more signage in some of the waterfront locations as well. Next slide, please. So kind of the recommendations laid out in the report. We want to implement paid parking at Millennium Park and along Heritage Drive. We want to restrict parking in certain areas where maybe traffic, there isn't enough room for parking on two sides of the road. At the Collingwood Harbor, we want to limit parking to the outer perimeter of the lot. Boat launch will increase slightly to $10 a year per launch, or $80 for a seasonal launch permit. Slip holders will be able to park for free within the Collingwood or within the harbor parking lot. And residents and non-residents, so those people living in Wasaga Beach, Clearview, the town of Bloom Mountains, who have a valid permit, will also be able to park along the outer perimeter in that lot if they so choose. All other users will be required to pay $10 an hour or $50 a day. Plus, if they're launching any boats, it's $10. This will be enforced 9 a.m. till 9 p.m., similar to what we're doing right now at other waterfront locations. Next slide, please. So we want to obviously continue to offer free parking for residents. So with this recommendation to expand, we're looking to install 2 multi-space parking machines along with hotspot signage. And adding 2 additional seasonal positions, 1 bylaw supervisor that would look after the seasonal officers for the summer, and 1 customer service representative who will help customer service respond to those inquiries that we're expected to see in next month. Next slide, please. And I apologize if this is really small, but it's in the report. I just wanted to identify the effect on town finances, which essentially there is no effect on town finances based on the anticipated expenses that weren't budgeted for and our anticipated revenue. There should be a surplus at the end. Depending on how well it goes over, will depend on the actual amount. Next slide, please. So kind of a conclusion. So the revenue is expected to exceed expenses by $30,000 without paid parking. To stimulate turnover, people tend to take up spots and hold them all day, which obviously results in very few parking spaces. And regulating parking will help to ensure this safe and unobstructed movement of vehiculars and pedestrian traffic. And that's all I have for you tonight. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Clerk Thomas, would there be anyone in the audience wishing to speak?
Thank you. If there is anybody wishing to participate, please press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. No interest at this time, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So I'll get this on the floor and then we can have committee members comment. That staff report FS 2022-02, expansion of seasonal paid parking, be received, and that council approve and support the recommendations as outlined in the staff report, and that council enacts a bylaw to amend Schedule A and H of Town of Collingwood bylaw number 2003-62 as amended, and that the additional expenditures in 2022 associated with the expansion of paid parking at the Collingwood Harbour as well as Millennium Park be funded from the parking reserve, and that the additional operating costs and revenues associated with the expansion of paid parking be brought forward as part of the 2023 budget. Can I have a mover and a seconder? That would be Councillor Jeffrey and Mayor Saunderson. Any comments or questions from the committee members? Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. So no, I think this is a great report and a great result, and I think we finally found our groove for the parking solutions at the waterfront. And I think it makes perfect sense to move into the other areas that are suggested here. My only question is really one for a technologically challenged person. Does this mean in the registration this year that I have to go back in and scan my documents again, or does the system keep my documents on file and I can just renew?
Acting Manager Herod, would that be a question for you?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. And yes, it would be so through you to Councillor Jeffrey. So unfortunately, yes, the answer is yes. But we hope to make it very streamlined. We're essentially just requiring one proof of residency. So that could be a driver's license. So it's you submit that along with your plates, and we essentially approve it.
That sounds good. I think I can handle it.
Okay, she's ready.
All right.
Would any other member have any comments? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Doherty, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you to Bylaw Officer Herod, thank you. I will echo Councillor Jeffrey's remarks. It was an excellent report, and I must say it's a well-needed development for Millennium Park, for sure, having spent some time there this summer. Parking often was a real jumbled mess, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you that. So a good recommendation, and I very much support it. I just have a couple of maybe oddball questions. First of all, you're indicating that you would recognize the revenue in 2023. I'm just wondering why, because this will be 2022 revenue.
Who would like to answer that question?
I believe I can probably speak to it, Chair. I think the reason why Adam's just using that as an example that we'd be able to firm and be able to tally what revenue we do moving the program forward to 2023 for operating costs is the intent of his comment there. So right now it will cover any operating costs in 2022, the revenue, but then going forward we can present it in budget in a finer format and show what we've earned and the actual cost moving forward to 2023 budget.
Great, thank you. And then my next question, the parking will be monitored from 9 a.m. until 9 p.m. Will you also be making a boat launch attendant available between those hours on a regular basis?
Who would like to answer that question? Yeah.
I can probably field that. Thank you, Chair. Through you, the likelihood is that we'll be following the same pattern as we have in previous years, which is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. For launching and monitoring the lot and monitoring the boats. We don't have any option at this point to expand that time based on staff costs, but that's what we've done in the past, and that's what we intend to do, regardless of the parking change.
Okay, thank you. The reason why I was asking was anecdotally, it appears that we lose a lot of revenue, especially when the nights or the evenings are long. But I appreciate that's a staffing challenge right now. Just my last question. last year we put some of our bylaw officers on bicycles as their means of transportation, and I understand that worked out well. So we are adding a bylaw staff. Will we be putting that staff on bicycle for transportation?
Go ahead.
I can answer that one. So through Chair Hamlin to Councillor Doherty. So yes, we have a fifth bicycle, which we do intend to use. This was like a purchase that we made before we purchased the 4 additional last year. So we do have enough bikes to go around.
Great, thank you. We got to practice what we preach. And those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further questions. Oh, yes. Go ahead, Clerk Almas.
I know, Chair Hamlin, you can't see very well on our small screens here, but Director Culver did have some comments that he would like to share.
Sorry, I didn't see it. Go ahead, Director Culver.
No worries. Thank you, Chair, and thank Clerk Almas. The couple things I just wanted to say really quickly is Councillor Doherty had mentioned about lost revenues, and we're continuing. This program is sort of an extension of what we've done at Sunset Point to acknowledge that the parking is very finite in that space as it is at Sunset Point. But lost revenues is something we still continue to take a look at when it comes to transient boaters and overnight boaters and things like that. So you'll probably see new information coming forward through staff reports as we work to acknowledge and address that issue as well. It just wasn't possible under this configuration and in order to be able to get this program in place for this summer. So just a comment in that regard. And then I think just to finish off my comments, I also wanted to acknowledge Adam and his work and the work of all of bylaw over the pilot of the Sunset Point paid parking program, as well as the work on this report. And all of the comments, bylaw has done just an unbelievable job for years now, and I really appreciate council's support in helping them get the labor or the manpower they need to continue to do that amazing work.
Okay, well, thank you very much for adding those comments, and very, very well received. Okay, I'm going to then ask that we bring this item 7.7 to a vote on seasonal paid parking. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is receiving the minutes of the Collingwood Heritage Committee. And I will just read in the resolution that the minutes of the Collingwood Heritage Committee meeting held February 22, 2022 be received, and the recommendations contained therein be approved. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? That's Councillor Doherty and Deputy Mayor Hall. Would anyone have any comments on these minutes? Seeing none, a call to vote. All those in favor? And that's approved unanimously. Thank you. Next item is the consent agenda, and I'm going to read in the resolution that Council herein receive the general consent agenda, and further that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are that of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. And the item here is 9.1 NVCA board highlights, and this is February 25, 2022. Could I have a mover and a seconder? And that's Councillor Jeffrey and Mayor Saunderson. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's passed. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is departmental updates. We have 2 matters here. The first one, as I mentioned, the introduction is 10.1, the wastewater treatment plant. And the item is particularly, let me go back to my note here. Going to be Manager McGinnity speaking on the wastewater treatment plant digester operations and the emergency response costs. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. So I'll provide an update on digester 2, which was the digester that had the failure on December 24th. I understand council was looking for information on the costs associated with the cleanup efforts associated with that event. So our contractor's invoices for the cost of the cleanup that work that was completed at the end of December and early January was approximately $34,000. And this does not include the staff time associated with that. So there was a lot of overtime and extra time involved with completing that work. So, but in terms of financial impact, that's where we were at. And just in terms of the project itself, so council is aware as the weather is starting to improve, we're going to be moving forward with the planned clean out of digester number 2 and the inspection, where we'll hopefully have more certainty around the cause of the failure and potential damages to the digester structure itself. So we can keep council informed as that project progresses. And this was the planned clean out inspection that was budgeted for as part of the 2022 operating budget. I also just wanted to provide a brief update on digester 1. So I know there have been some concerns about odor in the vicinity of the wastewater treatment plant since early this year, and it is associated with, I guess, a consequence of the digester 2 failure. Our other primary digester number 1 was out of service at the time that digester 2 failed. We had just finished cleaning and inspecting that, and it had just finished its pre-recommissioning inspections and passed those tests, but it hadn't yet been recommissioned. So we had to restart that digester under emergency conditions. And unfortunately, we were not able to slowly load it with sludge and mix it with already established sludge from another digester, because digester 2, we couldn't access the healthy sludge from that digester to help kickstart the process. So we've been trying to manage that process for the past couple months now and get it working properly, and reached out to neighboring municipalities to assist us with some healthy sludge to help. But we're starting to see some improvements. We're hoping that some noticeable odor improvements in that area as well. But what it comes down to is our ratio of the alkalinity in the digester to volatile fatty acids is not where it is. And so we're not getting enough methane forming organisms that's causing the odor issues. So we're starting to see that ratio improve. And we've been consulting with a digestion process expert to help our operations team through this time. And so we're just trying to manage the solids that are currently having to be processed through that digester. So we actually had to unfortunately make the decision last week to temporarily halt septage receiving at the wastewater treatment plant until the situation is resolved. It's just one more source of sewage that we were trying to manage. And over the period of time, we just felt like we weren't seeing the progress that we wanted to see. So we're trying this as another effort to help reduce the solids in our process. So I think, like I said, we're wait and see on that one, but hopefully we're starting to see some odor improvements around the wastewater plant, and it'll continue to improve over the next couple of weeks.
Okay, that would be great news. Would any committee member have any questions? Nope, seeing none. Thank you very much. Okay, item 10.2 is the submission of the Consolidated Environmental Compliance Approval Application, and this is for the existing sanitary and stormwater works. I understand this is a ministry requirement matter. Director Slamma, are you going to present this? Thank you.
Yes, I will, Chair Hamlin. Thank you very much. There is a presentation to go with this. I'll just speak to the presentation. So another acronym for you to learn this evening: Consolidated Linear Infrastructure Environmental Compliance Approval. Next slide, please. So in August of 2021, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks sent notification to all municipalities that they were going to be requiring the completion of a consolidated compliance, an environmental compliance approval, and which is a document, a form of document. And these are required under Section 51 of the Ontario Water Resources Act to use, operate, establish, alter, extend, or replace new or existing sewage works. Next slide, please. So the application has actually required a significant amount of staff effort to support the completion of the application. And so I just wanted to mention that to committee. Our GIS specialist worked on a lot of comprehensive mapping, which formed part of the application, and it is a process that identified all of our existing infrastructure. There was staff from engineering involved, environmental services, and public works. And this was just to identify and locate various existing approvals that have been previously received by the ministry and bring those all together for a comprehensive list of all our approvals for our in-ground infrastructures for both types of works, the sewage works and the storm works. So this has been a job that staff have been working away at for the last 6 months or so. Next slide, please. So the sanitary ECA will include town infrastructure like pumping stations, manholes, sewers, force mains, and the combined sewers. The stormwater ECA will include infrastructure such as storm sewers, manholes, oil grit separators, ditches, stormwater ponds, and LIDs, such as bioretention swales and infiltration galleries. The Collingwood wastewater treatment plant will still have a standalone ECA for the works that are on that site. And this setup is similar to what was introduced on the municipal drinking water side many years ago by the ministry. So on the municipal drinking water side, we have one license and one permit that lists all of our infrastructure. So now these ECAs will list all of our infrastructures on the 2 types of works. Next slide, please. And this slide just kind of demonstrates how approvals used to occur. So previously, approvals for ECAs were provided by the ministry on a pipe-by-pipe basis, meaning that for every municipal project and every subdivision development that was installing, extending, or replacing sewers and stormwater management ponds required individual ECAs. So several years ago, these would have been known as certificates of approval. Next slide, please. The consolidation of all of these approvals will reduce regulatory burden, provide clear and consistent requirements for all municipalities, and establish a holistic view of sewage works across the municipality and across the province. For many new projects with the CLI ECA, it will delegate approval to the municipalities for smaller works to proceed without having to apply for additional ministry permission, assuming that the project meets the criteria to be pre-authorized work, and that will be defined within the ECA document. So all our applications were submitted by March the 3rd, which was before our deadline, and small application fee, and we hope to see an approval, expect an approval turnaround time of 3 to 6 months. And that's all.
Okay, well, thank you for that update. Any questions or comments from our committee? No? You did a great job. No questions. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is for public delegations. Clerk Thomas, would there be anyone who would like to address the committee?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. We do have an attendee still. If you wish to address the standing committee, please press the raise your hand feature. No, there isn't, Chair Hamlin.
Okay, we're now on other business. And before we get to the election of the chair and vice chair, we'll deal with the motion that the mayor raised earlier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hopefully I can still read my writing. So the motion reads, whereas Collingwood is a designated growth node under the provincial Places to Grow policy, and was identified as in the 2020 census as one of the fastest growing communities in Ontario. And whereas Collingwood is experiencing the impacts of these growth pressures on our municipal infrastructure, including the capacity of our water treatment plant and wastewater treatment plant. And whereas Collingwood has declared a climate change emergency and recognizes the importance of developing climate resilience, and whereas Collingwood has identified sustainability as a priority under the Community-Based Strategic Plan and is partnering with the UN to champion the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 11 to promote towns that are safe, inclusive, sustainable, and resilient. And whereas as much as 1/3 of our purified water is used to flush toilets, and town staff are currently working on phase 2 of a stormwater management plan, master plan. Now therefore be it resolved that council directs staff to prepare a report on how the town can work with developers to install stormwater harvesting systems to A, use gray water to flush toilets and other household uses, and B, to divert and manage stormwater from our municipal infrastructure to reduce flood events.
Okay, thank you. So that'll be dealt with at a future meeting, then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, the last matter under other business would be the election of chair and vice chair of this committee. And Clerk Almas, I believe you'll be taking over the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. We will start the nomination process fresh this evening. So again, nominations will happen for the chair first and then the vice chair. You are able to nominate another person or nominate yourself. It doesn't require, nominations do not require a seconder. After the call for nominations has closed, I will confirm with each of the nominees whether they're interested in accepting the nomination. Each member will be provided up to 2 minutes to speak to express the reasons why you should be appointed to the position. After all nominees have had the chance to address the standing committee, I will call for the vote for the first candidate that was nominated until majority has been received. So at this time, I will open up the election process for the nominations for the position of chair.
I nominate Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. Any further nominations for the position of chair? Councillor Hammond.
I'll nominate Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. Is there any further nominations for the position of chair? No further nominations. Nominations are closed. Councillor Jeffrey, do you accept the nomination for the position of chair?
I do.
Councillor Doherty, do you accept the nomination for position of chair?
No, I will decline.
All right. By acclamation, we have our chair of DNO for our last year of this term.
Okay.
I will open up the nominations for the position of...
Oh, no, you were calling for nominations for vice chair?
Vice chair.
Yeah, that's what I'm ready for.
Position of vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Doherty, please.
Thank you. Any further nominations for the position of vice chair? Seeing none. Councillor Doherty, do you accept the position of vice chair?
I will accept.
All right. By acclamation, you will become our vice chair for our last year of the 2022 term.
Okay, thank you for that election process. And now we'll move to an adjournment of this meeting. That would be Councillor Jeffrey and all those in favor. And thank you for the meeting, everyone. Good night.